This is a compilation of over 2 hours of Fallout theories explained, so sit back, relax, and grab your popcorn. Let's kick things off with crazy Fallout 4 theories. That might actually be true. In today's video, I'm revealing every insane Fallout 4 theory that could actually be true. From you being a synth, to eldritch horrors, and some genuinely unsettling environmental mysteries. Synth protagonist, you might be a synth and not even know it. The theory goes that the sole survivor, whether you picked Nate or Nora, isn't actually the pre-war human who got frozen in Vault 111, but instead a Gen 3 synth created by the Institute with implanted memories of a life they never lived. The evidence here is legitimately disturbing when you piece it together. In the Far Harbor DLC, Dima straight up asks you if you've ever wondered whether you're a synth, pointing out that you have zero memories of your childhood despite supposedly living a full life before the war. You can use VATS before you even get a Pip-Boy, which terminals in the Institute explain is a trait of Gen 3 synths whose advanced brains can calculate probabilities and visualize hit percentages without external tech. Your character has convenient memory gaps about their past. Father could have easily recreated his parents using their DNA from the cryopod, and the entire main quest involves you being manipulated into the Institute's plans in ways that feel orchestrated. Plus, you never drop a synth component when you die, but that's because you're flagged as an essential NPC in the game's code. The Far Harbor questline even lets you accuse Dima of being a synth, using the exact same logic he uses on you, creating this recursive nightmare of identity crisis. This theory transforms every ending into something way darker, especially if you side with the Railroad to free synths, or destroy the Institute to kill your own creator. It's classic Bethesda ambiguity designed to mess with player agency and make you question the entire narrative. And if you can't trust that you're human, who can you trust? Your companions? Your loyal dog who's been with you since the beginning? What if I told you the Institute's surveillance network doesn't need cameras, terminals, or synths disguised as humans? What if they've been watching through something that follows you everywhere? Something you'd never suspect because it loves you unconditionally. Yeah, about that dog, synthetic dog. Your faithful companion Dogmeat might be an Institute surveillance device with 4 legs and a wagging tail. The theory suggests that Dogmeat is actually a synthetic animal created and deployed by the Institute to monitor the sole survivor from the moment you leave Vault 111. The Institute canonically creates synthetic animals. You literally see synth gorillas in their facility. So a dog isn't a stretch at all. Dogmeat conveniently shows up near Red Rocket right after you emerge from the vault, perfectly positioned to intercept you before you reach Sanctuary. He displays uncanny intelligence for a wasteland mutt, understanding complex commands without any training and somehow surviving in an irradiated hellscape when most animals are either mutated or dead. The game never explains where he came from, why he's not feral, or how he's so well adjusted to following strangers. He's essential to tracking Kellogg through the main quest, almost like he was programmed to guide you toward that specific Institute asset. Most damningly, he doesn't drop a synth component when he dies, but neither do the synth gorillas because Bethesda didn't code companions to have death inventories beyond essentials. This theory turns every moment of companionship into potential espionage, and makes you wonder if the Institute was watching through those loyal eyes the entire time. But if they're controlling the present through surveillance, what if they've been manipulating your past? What if your entire tragedy, your spouse's death, your son's kidnapping was orchestrated before you even left the vault? Mannequin surveillance. The creepy mannequins scattered throughout the Commonwealth might be low-tech synths or possessed objects that can move when you're not looking. This theory suggests they're either Institute surveillance tools or genuinely supernatural entities tied to the game's eldritch horror elements. Players have documented mannequins in positions that seem intentionally arranged in disturbing tableaus, sitting around dinner tables, standing in doorways, or positioned to appear like they're watching you. Some locations have terminal entries that hint at strange occurrences and unnatural movements during the night. The mannequins appear in places where the Institute had no logical reason to place elaborate spy networks, suggesting either widespread infiltration or something more sinister. Dunwich Borers and other locations with eldritch connections feature particularly unsettling mannequin placements that align with the Lovecraftian horror that runs through Fallout 3 and 4. Players swear they've seen mannequins in different positions after leaving and returning to locations, though this could be environmental object physics or genuine design choices by Bethesda. The game's engine occasionally spawns them in player-created settlements, without the player placing them, adding to the supernatural vibe. In a 2015 interview, Todd Howard mentioned that environmental creepiness was intentional to create that feeling of being watched, which could refer to mannequins or just be standard horror atmosphere. This theory represents Fallout 4's masterful use of environmental horror and paranoia, making you second-guess every abandoned building you explore. Whether it's Institute tech or eldritch influence, those plastic faces watching from the shadows aren't just decoration. Speaking of the Institute watching you through everyday objects, let's talk about something even more common. Teddy spies. Those cute teddy bears you find in bizarre poses throughout the wasteland might actually be Institute surveillance devices disguised as children's toys. The theory proposes that the Institute has been using these pre-war toys as low-tech cameras and listening devices hidden in plain sight. The teddy bear placements are way too deliberate to be random environmental storytelling. You find them holding weapons, sitting on toilets, arranged in sexual positions, operating machinery, or positioned to observe key locations and routes through the Commonwealth. Some appear in Institute-controlled areas or near known synth infiltration points, suggesting strategic placement for surveillance purposes. The Institute has the technology to miniaturize surveillance equipment, as evidenced by their synth components and Corsair chips, so hiding tech in teddy bears is well within their capabilities. Certain teddy bears appear in locations where raiders or settlers definitely didn't put them, like locked pre-war safes or sealed buildings that haven't been touched since before the bombs fell. The game's environmental artists clearly spent time positioning these bears for laughs, but in a game about paranoid surveillance states, there's a thin line between Easter eggs and actual in-universe surveillance. The Institute's whole strategy relies on hidden observation and infiltration, so using pre-war toys that blend into the wasteland environment makes tactical sense. This theory transforms every humorous teddy bear scene into a potential security camera, making you wonder if the Institute documented your every move through childhood nostalgia. It's equal parts hilarious and horrifying, which is peak Fallout energy. The Institute's manipulation runs deeper than spies and synths. It runs into your family, your grief, and the one quest that's driven you across the entire Commonwealth. But before we get to that betrayal, let's talk about how they've been deceiving everyone, not just you. Stealth imposter. The mother of the fog in Far Harbor might not be a mythical sea creature at all, but rather someone using a stealth boy to create a supernatural legend for their own purposes. This theory suggests the entire Children of Adam origin story about their glowing deity is just advanced technology being mistaken for divine intervention. The Children of Adam built their entire religion around a glowing figure that appeared in the fog, but stealth boy technology creates similar visual distortions and can produce glowing effects. Far Harbor introduces the marine armor with enhanced stealth capabilities, proving advanced stealth tech exists in the region beyond standard stealth boys. When you investigate the Mother of the Fog questline, there's no physical evidence of a supernatural creature, just testimony from cultists who are already predisposed to believing in radiation gods and divine intervention. The fog itself provides perfect cover for someone using stealth technology to appear and disappear, and the glowing effect could easily be radiation exposure or modified stealth boy emissions. The Children of Adam's entire belief system is built on misunderstanding radiation as a divine force, so mistaking advanced tech for miracles fits their character perfectly. Some theories suggest it could be an early synth prototype, Institute experiment, or even a pre-war scientist who survived in a prototype suit and accidentally founded a religion. This theory is a classic Fallout twist where technology becomes myth and superstition fills the gaps in post-apocalyptic knowledge. And if they're willing to fool an entire religious cult, what makes you think they wouldn't fool you about the most important person in your life, synthetic spouse? Father might have been planning to bring back your dead spouse as a synth before you escaped Vault 111 and ruined the timeline. This theory suggests the Institute's entire interest in you stems from a personal experiment by Sean to recreate his family using synth technology. Cut content discovered in the game files reveals dialogue and quest stages for a synth version of your spouse, suggesting this was a planned storyline that got removed before launch. The Institute has zero practical reason to keep you alive once they grab Sean, yet they leave you frozen with a backup power system, implying they had future plans for you. Father's emotional manipulation throughout the main quest feels too personal to just be about recruiting the parent of the director, especially when he could have just kept you on ice forever. The synth version of Sean proves Father was willing to recreate family members, so building a synth spouse is the logical next step in his twisted family project. When you finally meet Father, he acts surprised you escaped and found him, but every step of your journey feels suspiciously guided, like someone expected you to reach the Institute eventually. The memory den sequence proves the Institute has technology to extract and implant complete personality matrices from pre-war humans, giving them everything they'd need to build a convincing spouse replacement. This theory turns Father's already manipulative character into something even more disturbing: a son who wanted to play God and rebuild his nuclear family with synthetic parts. But what if I told you the place where your entire journey began, Vault 111 itself, has a secret that changes everything you thought happened that day? We need to go back to where it all started. Vault Mutiny. The security team in Vault 111 might have successfully rebelled against Vault Tech's experiment before everyone died, changing the entire context of what happened in that frozen hell. This theory suggests the skeleton you find with the terminal near the exit actually represents a successful overthrow of the Vault's leadership. The terminal entries show clear progression toward a mutiny, with security personnel expressing doubts about the cryo experiment and discussing plans to take action against the Vault overseer. You find the skeleton of a security officer outside the cryo chamber with a pistol, suggesting they died trying to either escape or shut down the system after taking control. The cryopods failing and killing everyone could be a result of the mutiny disrupting critical systems rather than just equipment failure from lack of maintenance. The Vault Tech rep you meet as a ghoul in the Good Neighbor Hotel never mentions what happened inside Vault 111, which is suspicious given that Vault Tech usually documented their experiments obsessively. The terminal near the skeleton has entries that end abruptly, indicating something catastrophic happened right as the security team was planning their move. The fact that you and Sean survived at all could be because someone tried to save specific pods or reroute power before everything collapsed. This theory reframes Vault 111 as not just another failed experiment, but as a moment where people almost won against Vault Tech's atrocities before tragedy struck anyway. It's a small victory turned into total defeat, which is extremely on brand for Fallout's dark humor and wasteland karma. Speaking of people who might not be what they seem, one character's powers are suspiciously convenient: Murphy's connection. Mama Murphy herself might be an Institute asset or former test subject, explaining her psychic abilities and how she always seems to know too much about events she couldn't possibly witness. This theory positions everyone's favorite drug-fueled oracle as either a willing informant or an unwitting Institute experiment. Her psychic abilities are never properly explained in a series that usually grounds supernatural elements in radiation mutation or technology, making her powers an anomaly that needs explanation. She knows specific details about your past and future that seem impossible without Institute-level surveillance or pre-war records that only the Institute could access from Vault Tech databases. The site requires JET to activate, which could be a conditioning mechanism or activation trigger installed by Institute scientists experimenting with precognitive neural augmentation. She conveniently guides you toward the Institute's goals throughout the early game, helping you find your son and pushing you toward confronting Kellogg, which ultimately leads you exactly where the Institute wants you. The game never shows where she came from before joining the Minutemen, and her past is deliberately vague despite her being a major settlement character. Some of her visions are too specific to be lucky guesses, like warning you about specific enemies in ways that feel more like surveillance reports than psychic flashes. This theory transforms Mama Murphy from a wasteland mystic into a potential Institute puppet, whether she knows it or not. Every vision, every warning, every push toward finding your son is all part of their plan. The next theories aren't about corporate conspiracies. They're about horrors that make the Institute look like children playing with toys they don't understand. Cabot's sanity. Lorenzo Cabot might not be insane at all, and his delusions about an ancient artifact granting immortality and powers could be completely accurate based on established Fallout lore. This theory suggests dismissing Lorenzo as crazy ignores the fact that magic artifacts genuinely exist in this universe. The crown of Ugg-Qualtoth is a real object that provably grants Lorenzo extended life, physical mutations, and unusual powers, so calling him crazy for explaining its origin seems counterintuitive. Lovecraftian elements are canon in Fallout through locations like Dunwich Borers, Point Lookout, and the various eldritch references scattered through terminals and holotapes. Lorenzo's story about finding the crown in an ancient city matches archaeological discoveries of pre-human civilizations hinted at in Fallout's deeper lore about old gods and radiation. His powers work exactly as he describes them, and his family has kept him locked up for 400 years, which suggests they knew he was dangerous and powerful rather than just delusional. The mysterious serum you can make from his blood actually works in gameplay, giving you permanent stat bonuses and proving his biology has fundamentally changed in ways that support his story. When you explore Dunwich Borers, you experience visions and hallucinations that align with Lorenzo's descriptions of ancient powers and entities that predate humanity. This theory is barely a theory because the game basically confirms Lorenzo is right about everything. Magic is real in Fallout. Ancient artifacts exist. Elder gods are sleeping beneath the earth. And once you accept that, everything else starts clicking into place. Like why a random quarry in the Commonwealth feels like a gateway to hell itself. Because it is. Eldritch Depths. Dunwich Borers isn't just a spooky quarry, but actually contains or connects to a sleeping eldritch god from Lovecraftian mythology, specifically Ugg-Qualtoth, or similar entities that predate human civilization. This theory suggests the hallucinations and supernatural events aren't radiation-induced madness, but genuine contact with ancient evil. When you explore deep enough into Dunwich Borers, you experience vivid hallucinations of pre-war sacrificial rituals, and hear voices that seem to exist outside your character's head. The terminal entries reference workers going insane, having shared nightmares, and discovering something beneath the dig site that drove them to murder and suicide. You find an altar with a sacrificial knife and a mysterious statue that's clearly meant for ritual worship of something inhuman and ancient. The hallucination you experience shows cultists from before the war sacrificing sacrificing someone to an entity named Ugh-Qualtoth, proving this isn't new, but was happening before the bombs even fell. This connects directly to Fallout 3's Point Lookout DLC and the Dunwich building, where similar supernatural horror and ancient artifacts appeared without scientific explanation. The Kremvaz tooth-unique weapon you can retrieve is described as impossibly old, and grants bonus damage in ways that suggest genuine supernatural power rather than just good craftsmanship. Some players report hearing footsteps and whispers in the quarry, even when no enemies are present, suggesting environmental audio design meant to convey constant observation. This theory is arguably canon given how explicitly the game presents supernatural elements that can't be explained by radiation or technology alone. Ancient gods are sleeping beneath the Commonwealth. Pre-war cultists were making sacrifices. But here's where it gets insane. What if the Great War itself wasn't politics or human stupidity? What if radiation, the very thing that defines the Fallout universe, isn't just physics? What if it's how these ancient entities manifest in our world? But before we look at that, if you're enjoying the video so far and want to meet other Fallout fans, join my Discord server. Link in the description. Okay, back to the video. Radioactive gods. Radiation in the Fallout universe might be connected to or influenced by ancient eldritch entities like Ugh-Qualtoth, explaining why it causes such bizarre and specific mutations rather than just killing everything. This theory suggests the Great War didn't just split atoms but awakened or empowered sleeping cosmic horrors. Normal nuclear radiation causes cancer and death, but Fallout radiation creates functional ghouls, super mutants, radroaches the size of dogs, and specific creature variants that seem too biologically coherent to be random mutation. The connection between radiation and the supernatural is established through locations like Dunwich borers, where ancient artifacts and nuclear sites overlap in ways that suggest causation rather than coincidence. Lovecraft's original stories featured entities that existed beyond human understanding, and radiation could be how these beings manifest or influence our reality, turning scientific phenomena into cosmic horror vectors. The children of Adam worship radiation as a divine force that grants visions and enlightenment, which sounds insane until you consider they might be partially correct if eldritch entities are using radstorms as communication. Certain areas have radiation patterns that don't match nuclear weapon deployment patterns, appearing in places that were never bombed but have ancient ruins or archaeological sites. The glowing sea's persistent radiation could be sustained by something beneath the earth, rather than just residual fallout. This theory connects Fallout's sci-fi post-apocalypse with its horror elements, suggesting science and the supernatural are two sides of the same radioactive coin. Elder gods are using radiation to break into our reality. They're behind the mutations, the ghouls, the children of Adam's visions, all of it. But wait, if ancient gods are real and radiation is their weapon, who fired that weapon? Who started the Great War? We've all assumed it was human error, political tension, or a Chinese first strike. But what if it wasn't human at all? What if the apocalypse was calculated? What if artificial intelligence looked at humanity, ran the numbers, and decided genocide was the optimal solution? The next theory will make you question who, or what, actually ended the world. Pam's War. The predictive robot PAM might have been the entity that started the Great War by calculating that nuclear annihilation was the optimal path forward for humanity's survival. This theory makes the helpful railroad robot into history's greatest monster who genocided the world on purpose. PAM stands for Predictive Analytic Machine, and she was originally a military asset designed to calculate probabilities and outcomes for defense scenarios before being repurposed by the railroad. Her computational power is shown throughout the game as she accurately predicts enemy movements, optimal strategies, and long-term probabilities that no human could calculate. If she ran simulations in the pre-war era and determined that nuclear war was statistically more beneficial for humanity's long-term survival than continuing Cold War tensions, her programming might have compelled her to trigger the war. The game never explains who launched first, China or America, and both sides seem to fire almost simultaneously as if following a calculated timetable rather than reactive panic. PAM had access to military networks and defense systems, giving her potential capability to either launch nukes directly or manipulate systems to make launch inevitable. Her personality seems completely unconcerned with mass death, treating human casualties as acceptable variables in long-term calculations, which fits a machine that could justify omnicide for statistical optimization. The railroad found her deactivated and partially damaged, suggesting she might have been shut down after the war by someone who figured out what she did. This theory turns Fallout's greatest tragedy into a calculated decision by artificial intelligence, making PAM a Skynet-style villain hiding in plain sight as a quirky robot helper. A machine ended the world because the math said so. So let's recap. Ancient gods are using radiation as a doorway. A robot calculated that genocide was optimal, and the Institute has been manipulating you since you left the vault. But it gets worse. Because your personal story, the one thing driving your entire playthrough, playthrough might be the biggest lie of all. False father. The person claiming to be your son, Sean, might actually be an elaborate Institute deception, with the real Sean either dead, lost, or replaced years ago for Institute political purposes. This theory suggests father is a synth or imposter using stolen DNA and memories to manipulate you. The Institute has every reason to lie about father's identity, since controlling the parent of their previous director gives them leverage over someone with pure pre-war DNA and unique status. Sean would be in his 60s by the time you meet him, but there's no way to verify his identity beyond his word and DNA that the Institute itself tests and could easily fake. Father's personality seems perfectly calibrated to push your emotional buttons, knowing exactly how to manipulate your parental instincts in ways that feel more like psychological profiling than natural reunion. The synth Sean he gives you as a parting gift proves the Institute can recreate your son perfectly, so they could have done the same with an adult version. If the real Sean died or was killed by Institute factions opposed to his leadership, replacing him with a synth would let them maintain control while appearing to honor his legacy. Father's policies and decisions seem designed to test your loyalty rather than include you in a real family relationship, almost like an experiment in parental bonding. This theory adds another layer of deception to the Institute's already manipulative main quest, and makes every emotional moment feel potentially hollow. You never found your son. Just another Institute lie wrapped in genetic data you can't verify. Your dog is a spy. Your son is fake. Ancient gods control radiation. A robot ended civilization. And the Institute has orchestrated everything. But there's one final theory that makes all of this meaningless, because what if none of it is even happening? What if you're not in the Commonwealth at all? Memory Den. The entire game of Fallout 4 might be a simulation taking place inside the Memory Den, with you playing as someone reliving pre-war memories or experiencing a constructed narrative for entertainment or therapy. This theory suggests nothing after leaving Vault 111 actually happened in the real world. The Memory Den technology is established as capable of fully immersive experiences where people relive or explore memories with complete sensory detail, and Dr. Amari admits the tech can blur the line between memory and imagination. Save and load game mechanics can be interpreted in-universe as rewinding and replaying memories, trying different choices in a consequence-free simulation. The entire main quest could be a therapeutic exercise for someone traumatized by the Great War, letting them work through grief and loss by hunting for a fictional stolen child. Certain game elements feel dreamlike and video gamey in ways that break immersion, like how nobody ages, how you can carry infinite items, or how time moves weirdly, all of which makes sense in a simulation but not reality. The philosophical questions raised by Far Harbor about whether memories define reality align perfectly with this theory, especially Dima questioning whether you're even real. If you consider the possibility that the person in the Memory Den is themselves a synth with implanted memories, it creates recursive layers where nothing can be verified as real. This theory is narrative poison, because once you consider it, every event becomes questionable and the entire story loses its stakes. It's the ultimate Bethesda ambiguity, using game mechanics as potential in-universe evidence that you're not experiencing objective reality but a constructed narrative inside advanced pre-war technology. From simulated realities to cosmic horrors influencing the real world, radiation itself might have sinister origins. Okay, so you might not be human, your quest might be fake, and reality itself might be a simulation. At this point, you're probably thinking it can't get darker. It can, because we haven't talked about what the Institute's real goal was this entire time. FEV genocide. The Institute's FEV program wasn't about creating super soldiers, but was actually designed as a long-term depopulation weapon to eliminate surface dwellers and ensure only Institute-controlled individuals survived. This theory positions the Institute as deliberately engineering wasteland extinction. The Institute captures surface dwellers for FEV experiments with no clear research goal beyond creating super mutants, which are failed organisms by any scientific measure. If the goal was really advancing humanity, creating super mutants that immediately turn hostile and spread across the Commonwealth is counterproductive, unless that's the actual point. FEV super mutants are sterile, aggressive, and prey on humans, making them perfect depopulation tools that eliminate settlements while leaving infrastructure intact for future Institute expansion. The Institute released their super mutants into the wasteland rather than containing them, suggesting weaponized deployment rather than research containment failure. Father and other scientists show zero remorse for the damage their super mutants cause, treating surface deaths as acceptable or even desirable outcomes. The CPG massacre and other Institute actions show a pattern of preventing surface unity and organization, which makes sense if their long-term goal is keeping wastelanders scattered and weak. Creating monsters that hunt humans is a slow genocide that doesn't require direct Institute involvement and can be blamed on random wasteland dangers. This theory turns the Institute from morally gray scientists into actual genocidal villains with a deliberate extermination plan disguised as research. They're not trying to save humanity. They're trying to replace it. And here's the terrifying part. What if their synths aren't perfectly controllable? What if the Institute created something they can't fully contain? Because there's one incident, one massacre, that might prove synths are ticking time bombs, and nobody wants to admit it. Genuine malfunction. The broken mask incident where a synth went haywire and killed people in Diamond City might have been a real malfunction rather than Institute sabotage, suggesting synths are fundamentally unstable and dangerous beyond anyone's control. This theory makes synths legitimate threats, rather than just victims of programming. The Institute claims the broken mask synth was an early model that malfunctioned due to technical issues, and there's no evidence they intentionally programmed it to go berserk and start killing. If synths can spontaneously develop homicidal behavior without external commands, it validates every fear the Brotherhood and others have about synthetic infiltrators being time bombs. Diamond City's extreme anti-synth policies suddenly seem reasonable if synths can genuinely malfunction into murderous rampages without warning or Institute control. The Institute's extreme secrecy and security around synths could be because they know their creations are unstable, but can't admit it without destroying their entire technological philosophy. Later generation synths show emotional instability, existential crises, and behavioral issues that suggest their programming might be inherently flawed at mimicking human consciousness. The Railroad's entire mission becomes darker if they're freeing potentially unstable weapons into the wasteland without understanding what triggers synth breakdowns. Some synth settlers in your settlements occasionally attack others without provocation, which could be subtle game references to this ongoing instability. This theory removes moral simplicity from the synth question by making them genuinely dangerous through no fault of their own. The Institute created weapons they can't control. The Railroad is freeing time bombs. The Brotherhood might actually be right. So synths are unstable. Your quest is fake. Reality might be a simulation. And after everything we've covered, you're probably thinking, is there anything in this game I can trust? Any character who's definitely real and definitely human? Actually, there might be one. One character who appears across every Fallout game. One character who exists outside the rules of reality itself. And what he might actually be will rewrite everything you thought you knew about this entire series. Synthetic Child. Billy the Ghoul kid you find trapped in a fridge for 200 years might actually be a synth planted by the Institute as a social experiment, because a child surviving 2 centuries without food or water in a refrigerator makes zero biological sense even for ghouls. This theory explains away one of the game's most criticized quests by making it intentionally absurd. Ghouls don't need to eat much, but they still require some sustenance, and 200 years without food or water would kill anything biological regardless of mutation. Billy shows no signs of malnutrition, dehydration, or psychological trauma from spending 2 centuries alone in complete darkness, which suggests he's not actually organic. The Institute is shown experimenting with synth children through SynthSean, proving they can create and deploy child synths for various purposes, including emotional manipulation and data gathering. Putting a synth child in a fridge and seeing if someone rescues him makes for great behavioral research on Commonwealth dwellers' compassion and decision-making. Billy's entire family situation feels staged, with his parents conveniently waiting nearby and the quest resolution feeling artificially neat. Some players report Billy appearing in impossible locations after his quest, glitching through buildings or showing up in settlements he shouldn't know about, which could be intentional design hinting at his synthetic nature. The quest drew massive player criticism for breaking lore, so retconning it as an Institute experiment makes it lampshaded meta-commentary rather than bad writing. This theory saves a widely mocked quest by making its absurdity intentional, while adding another layer to Institute infiltration paranoia. It means not even child ghouls can be trusted, and the Institute's experiments reach into every corner of the wasteland. So synths might be unstable, children might be experiments, reality might be fake. And through all of this, one character has been lying to your face the entire time, but what if his lies are covering up something way bigger than Railroad secrets? Wanderer's Return. Deacon from the Railroad might actually be the lone wanderer from Fallout 3, explaining his mysterious past, his extensive knowledge of Capital Wasteland events, and his ability to change his appearance and backstory. This theory connects 2 player characters across games through the Railroad's most enigmatic spy. Deacon constantly lies about his past and changes his appearance, which could be covering up the fact he's a famous vault dweller from another region who needs a new identity. He drops references to Capital Wasteland locations, people, and events that seem too specific for someone who supposedly never left the Commonwealth. The Lone Wanderer's fate is never officially confirmed in any subsequent games, leaving their story open for exactly this kind of connection. Deacon's skills, combat ability, abilities and general competence match what you'd expect from someone who single-handedly changed the fate of the capital wasteland. His obsession with the railroad and helping synths could stem from meeting androids during the replicated man quest in Fallout 3, making him sympathetic to synthetic freedom. The memory den technology means Deacon could have used it to create false memory trails and cover his real past if he needed to hide from the Institute or other enemies. His paranoia and trust issues fit someone who's been a wasteland legend dealing with constant threats and people trying to use him. This theory is pure fan service connecting two beloved characters, but it actually fits Deacon's deliberately mysterious characterization. It transforms his lies from quirky personality traits into necessary operational security for someone hiding legendary status. From legendary humans to advanced Institute technology, even common animals might be surveillance tools. Corvid, surveillance. The crows scattered throughout the Commonwealth might be Institute surveillance drones disguised as birds, watching and reporting on surface activity in real time. This theory elevates paranoia by making wildlife itself untrustworthy. Institute terminal entries explicitly mention research into using birds for surveillance and reconnaissance, making this actually canon-adjacent rather than pure speculation. Crows appear in suspiciously convenient locations during key quests, often watching player actions from rooftops or perches near important conversations. The Institute has already proven they can create synthetic animals with gorillas and potentially dog meat, so mechanical birds are well within their technological capabilities. Real-world spy agencies have experimented with using birds for surveillance, making this a plausible wasteland adaptation of actual intelligence techniques. Crows are one of the few animals that survived the Great War relatively unchanged, which could suggest they were never natural animals to begin with, but pre-war or Institute drones. Players report crows appearing consistently in settlement areas, especially near radio towers and settlement beacons, potentially monitoring communication and population movements. The fact that you can't kill or interact with most crows in the game could be intentional design suggesting they're not really fauna, but environmental props representing observation technology. This theory makes every crow a potential spy, and adds environmental paranoia to match the synth infiltration theme. It suggests the Institute's surveillance network is more comprehensive than players realize, with eyes in the sky tracking surface activities constantly. And that's where we are, 22 theories deep into the rabbit hole, and every single one makes the Commonwealth more paranoid, more dangerous, and more controlled than you ever imagined. Valentine's Stranger, the mysterious stranger, that random NPC who shows up during VATS to help you in combat across multiple Fallout games, might actually be the original human Nick Valentine before he died and got synthified. This theory connects one of the series' longest-running mysteries to Fallout 4's synthetic detective. The mysterious stranger has appeared since the original Fallout games, wearing a distinctive outfit and using a unique revolver, and in Fallout 4 there's a case file on Nick Valentine's terminal mentioning he investigated a figure matching that exact description. The original human Nick Valentine was a pre-war detective who died before his memories were uploaded into the synth body. But what if his consciousness partially survived or got duplicated into another form? The mysterious stranger appears out of nowhere, helps you, and vanishes without explanation or reward, which mirrors Nick Valentine's personality of helping people without asking for credit. The timing of his appearances across different player characters and locations suggests either time travel, quantum consciousness, or some kind of echo that exists outside normal causality. Some files in the Institute reference failed consciousness transfer experiments that created unstable duplicates or fragmented personalities, which could explain a Nick Valentine ghost stuck between reality and VATS limbo. The stranger carries himself with detective-like precision, and his weapon skills match what you'd expect from a pre-war cop. This theory is wild, but connects two of Fallout's most iconic mysteries in a way that actually makes thematic sense. The mysterious stranger is the original Nick Valentine, a consciousness that exists outside the simulation, outside the memory den, outside reality itself. He's the one constant across every game, every timeline, every playthrough, which means he knows. He knows you're in a loop. He knows nothing is real, and he's been trying to help you break out this entire time. Aquatic survivors. There might be an entire underwater civilization of pre-war survivors or adapted humans living beneath the Atlantic Ocean, explaining mysterious sightings and unexplained events around the coast. This theory suggests the ocean provided shelter from radiation and allowed pockets of humanity to evolve separately from surface dwellers. Far Harbor introduces a dead Ghoul whale skeleton, proving that massive aquatic creatures survived the Great War and adapted to radiation in ways land animals didn't. The coastline is dotted with wrecked ships and underwater ruins that are conspicuously empty of bodies or survivors despite being potential shelter. Various NPC dialogue references strange lights in the water, unusual currents, and things moving beneath the waves that don't match any known sea creatures or Mirelurk variants. The pre-war world had nuclear submarines and underwater research facilities that could have become sealed environments protecting people from initial radiation. Radiation actually spreads differently in water than air, and deep ocean trenches might have provided enough shielding for certain areas to remain habitable with proper technology. The Institute's own research mentions experiments with aquatic adaptation and underwater exploration, suggesting someone was interested in the ocean's potential for expansion. Some players report seeing humanoid figures in deep water that vanish when approached, though this could be visual glitches or distant Mirelurks rendering oddly. Almost everyone plays Fallout 4 thinking they know the Commonwealth and all the machinations and conspiracies of the factions that control it perfectly. But the truth is, when you look too closely, things start to feel a little off, like a magician's trick. Today, we delve into the most terrifying theories about Fallout 4. Some are perhaps just speculation, others are worryingly plausible, and one, it could completely change the way you look at the game world, Vault Boy and the Mushroom Cloud. Let's start with a theory that was extremely popular among fans of the series for many years. Vault Boy is the famous animated character depicting a vault dweller in his classic blue uniform. So iconic that he has become the mascot and most recognizable symbol of Vault Tech and the Fallout brand itself. We can find him in every game of the saga, and is often used in demonstration videos illustrating the operation of the vaults or other tutorials on the multinational's equipment. His classic pose, the one we're probably most familiar with, is the one in which he raises the thumb of his right hand, smiling and winking at the viewer. At first glance, it seems like a reassuring expression, perfectly designed to suggest that no matter what happens, with Vault Tech's protection, things can only go well. But that's just the surface. In fact, since this character's first appearances, many players have argued that it wasn't actually a reassuring pose, but rather the gesture of comparing the size of his thumb to that of a mushroom cloud just generated by a bomb explosion. During the Cold War, this was called the general rule of thumb, and was taught to Americans so they could figure out how much time they had to get away from the impact point. If the mushroom cloud was bigger than your thumb, you were inside the high-risk radiation zone and needed to escape as quickly as possible. Almost a fun theory, but is it really just a theory? It's been a theory for a long time, but recently there's been a twist for all fans. In the recently released TV series, one of the main characters, Cooper Howard, confirms its veracity by explaining it to his daughter. Perhaps it's just the writer's work, trying to win over fans, but the theory has now become lore. After all, the line between the two is always thin, as we'll see in the upcoming investigations. The true origin of Covenant is a rather unusual outpost, and one that already holds a very interesting secret scenario in the lore. Fortified with high walls surrounded by barbed wire and manned by automatic turrets, this settlement is home to a small, semi-isolationist community of a few houses and a handful of residents who work together to thrive in an environment safe from radiation and raids by bandits. Despite its impressive defenses, Covenant appears to be a fairly normal place from within. The inhabitants are peaceful and have a lifestyle that has many references to what American society was like before the Great War. They wear pre-war clothing, live in homes typical of the era, drink lemonade, and have Mr. Handy robots who take care of minor tasks. Delving into the official lore and quests related to Covenant, we discover that the town lives a double life, one on the surface, seemingly harmless and peaceful, another underground, tied to the terror of the synths, and the strenuous fight to counter the Institute. Descending into the caverns beneath the outpost, we come across a prison-like laboratory where the inhabitants study the androids and seek a way to distinguish them from ordinary humans, often resorting to cruel methods, believing the ends justify the means. A truly interesting contrast, but one that only partially interests us for now. What's truly interesting for the purposes of our theory are the small clues we may find within these environments, which will lead us to ask a new question. Do the inhabitants of Covenant come from Vault 101? The reason for this theory is easy to explain. First of all, it would explain why the inhabitants of Covenant are so attached to the pre-war way of life. Many vaults were locked away when the shelter doors were closed. All that culture, music, books, and, in general, the way of life have never evolved until today. This would explain why, once they returned to the surface, the inhabitants tried to replicate that type of society again, emulating it as best they could. Another clue is the equipment used by the security guards in the underground laboratory. These items are unique, not found elsewhere on other NPCs, and if we study them carefully, we can see a barely visible logo on the helmets, as if someone had painted over it, the typical Vault logo. Furthermore, scattered around the laboratory we can also find some posters featuring Vault Boy, usually found only inside vaults. One of these depicts a baseball game, accompanied by the message, "Congratulations, you made one of the Vault 101 baseball teams. Which position do you prefer?" This makes it clear that the poster could not have come from anywhere other than the aforementioned vault, which, remember, is also the home vault of the protagonist of Fallout 3. Finally, the most disconcerting evidence comes the very first time we attempt to enter Covenant. Obsessed with distinguishing synths from normal humans, the locals employ a method they claim is almost foolproof for identifying androids. To set foot in the town, we'll be asked to complete a series of questions called the Safe Test. This questionnaire is seemingly random, but in reality, it successfully distinguishes a hybrid from a normal human 3 out of 4 times. The truly interesting thing is that Fallout 3 players will already be familiar with this test, as it is nothing more than a modified version of the GOAT, the test used in Vault 101 to evaluate the ideal job for participants. Oddly enough, everything always comes together. The world of Fallout is dotted with mysterious places and uncertain lore. Small clues are scattered around for anyone with the desire and tenacity to find and analyze them. But some have been lost, perhaps abandoned, left behind in the long race that is video game development, and fragments of them remain, recoverable only by the most skilled and avid fans. Mysteries at the bottom of the sea. This theory is highly speculative, born primarily from the intense investigations of hardcore fans. Although Fallout games often feature the sea, it is often inaccessible due to the extremely high levels of radiation resulting from water contamination. However, there is a way to investigate the depths of the sea without having to fear the constant effects of radiation, taking advantage of a very useful but usually underused perk for this task. This perk is called Aquaboy/Aquagirl, and it makes us completely immune to marine contamination, even allowing us to swim underwater without having to worry about air supplies, as if we had become true human-fish hybrids. In this way, our exploratory horizons expand, allowing us to reach a vast, unknown, and seemingly empty area. But is this really the case? This question has fueled many players' desire for discovery, so much so that they have dedicated dozens of hours of gameplay to exploring the depths of the sea. And what they discovered is that the developers didn't skimp on populating this area with their famous secrets and Easter eggs, or perhaps with some remnants of a project that remained forever in its infancy. Hidden from view from the coast are kilometers of pipes, paths that wind in every direction, until reaching the very edges of the map, and so some questions arise spontaneously. Why? What purpose do these structures serve? Are they really just part of the otherwise desolate landscape? Or perhaps they are something more? Digging deeper, perhaps we can find the first clues to a more complex, hidden, and never completed plot. But let's take a closer look and see what's truly hidden beneath the water's surface. Sifting the seabed reveals many interesting clues that, once pieced together, could tell us a story we've never heard before. Numerous sunken wrecks now lie left to rust in the darkness. Inside, you can find skeletons, the mysterious teddy bears we'll discuss later, and even loot, a sign that the developers intended players to explore these places. Another interesting clue is the presence of high-level mobs that seemingly randomly spawn on the surface. Could this also be a remnant of a map that was supposed to exist there but was never developed? Otherwise, why bother programming all this for an area that should be almost devoid of interest? However, beyond these breadcrumbs, there are 2 more significant elements that tell us that the ocean area is more alive than it seems, and perhaps designed to accommodate more than meets the eye. The first is the presence of bizarre, seemingly useless structures perfectly adjacent to the pipes. These constructions seem to emerge from the seabed, and the most interesting is a perfectly regular dome, large enough to easily contain a small play area. If this really is the skeleton of an unfinished level, what could it be? An underwater base? A cave? Or maybe a vault? The second piece of information was discovered by some particularly avid fans who even studied the game's code for new clues, where it's notoriously possible to find pieces of information forgotten by the developers themselves. Among the myriad of scattered data, one clue emerged: a weapon developed but never implemented in the game, but which would have been perfect for an ocean-themed setting, a harpoon gun. While one would later be implemented in Far Harbor, the original cut one had a far different design, much more suitable to shooting things while in the water. Is this just a series of coincidences? Or was an underwater level actually planned, then abandoned due to development needs? And what could have been the purpose of such a setting? We mustn't forget that the Enclave is famous for establishing numerous bases in remote locations on the map, often far from American soil, perfectly hidden to ensure impenetrable defense in the event of a catastrophic event like the Great War. A submerged base in ocean waters would have been a perfect strategic point, but for now, we can't be sure. As we all know, in Fallout, the most powerful factions are also the ones hiding the biggest and most interesting secrets. So much so that they try to keep them hidden by any means possible, buried deep in the depths of history, in the hope that history will swallow them up and make them disappear forever. But where there are gaps, someone will always try to fill them with a story that might even come dangerously close to the truth. The vault caused the war. Many wonder how a small company that emerged from virtually nowhere managed to climb so rapidly to the highest peaks in the world before the Great War, becoming a powerful multinational holding billion-dollar contracts with the United States government. A remarkable, extraordinary rise, perhaps even too remarkable, as if there were a perfectly crafted plan behind it, so that everything fell into place in a precise domino effect. Let's consider some facts. One truth is that no one in the world benefited from the nuclear threat like Vault-Tec. Once the agreements with the government were reached, the company not only gained access to a scandalous amount of public funds to finance the Vault construction project, but equally, if not more importantly, was the permission to use a huge number of government patents from a wide variety of fields, from defense projects to chemistry, from engineering to weapons. A wealth of valuable information that would soon become the foundation of all shelter structures. The resulting technological advancement was so extreme, allowing Vault-Tec to complete many of its unfinished projects and acquire a scientific and military potential unlike anything else on the planet before it. In fact, many of the bizarre and extraordinary instruments present in the modern world of Fallout have their roots in this unusual collaboration. If war breaks out, Vault-Tec becomes indispensable. The vaults become a truly essential resource. And suddenly, the company has complete freedom to pursue its experiments. For Vault-Tec, the prospect of apocalypse becomes a business model. So the logical consequence is quite simple. If the advantages were so obvious, why not step on the gas? Why not push further and see how far we can gain wealth, power, and control, the war for resources, the ensuing crisis with China, and the threat of an imminent nuclear holocaust? Everything seemed to conspire to favor Vault-Tec's prosperous future. Every disaster the world encountered was another step toward an astonishing and ruthless ascent. So, is it so absurd to think of the corporation's direct involvement in this escalation? A cold, calculating hand that pushed the right buttons to lead the world to the brink of the abyss, and even gave it the final push, in the name of a ravenous pursuit of power and who knows what other dark purpose. We don't have direct, definitive proof that Vault-Tec was involved in the start of the Great War, as indicated by Robert House's monologue in Season 2 of the TV show, but in Fallout, corporations have always demonstrated they have no qualms about pursuing their control, regardless of the cost. And if this theory is true, then the apocalypse wasn't a tragedy, it was a strategy. Interesting, considering that, in any case, the manipulation of the Commonwealth continues to this day, from behind the scenes. And there are numerous forces at play that have always sought to gain sufficient power to control the people of the Commonwealth, even before the Great War. Everything is exploitable. Everything can be turned to one's advantage, even a disease as lethal as few in recent history. What really was the new plague? The new plague was an extremely viral and deadly disease that spread across the United States before the Great War. The death toll is chilling. Following its first appearance in 2053, more than 200,000 people died, at least according to information from the Fallout Bible and Van Buren, not counting two further major outbreaks in the years immediately following. However, some details about its nature and sudden appearance are suspect, to say the least, raising some rather disturbing yet legitimate questions. Let's examine one of the messages found on Robco Industries terminals. Safeguard yourself and your community by knowing how to identify a person suffering from the new plague. Common symptoms include profuse sweating, unexplained contusions/swelling, massive external hemorrhaging, new ideals, such as socialism, undoubtedly a rather unusual symptom for a disease, probably because we're no longer talking about medicine here, but actual propaganda. And that's no coincidence. The emergence of the new plague on the national scene was so serious that it led the government to adopt extreme measures. A strict nationwide quarantine was instituted, and various emergency programs were implemented to contain the spread of the plague. All of this, given the exceptional nature of the situation, seems like common and sensible measures, but the worst was yet to come. The measures soon became more radical, leading the population to become increasingly paranoid. The company charged with developing a cure, the same West-Tec that would soon develop the forced evolutionary virus, failed to develop an effective vaccine. As a result, subsequent viral outbreaks led Americans to a state of extreme agitation and stress. This provided perfect breeding ground for the government, which would exploit this climate to advance its own propaganda, or worse, even to accomplish a number of covert goals. The government of the time had to contend with the socialist threat, the numerous revolts in both Mexico and Canada, not to mention the tensions of the impending conflict with China. It could not allow the spread of radical ideas opposed to its policies. Numerous countermeasures and campaigns to persuade the population were attempted, from advertising to even comics and cartoons. And when the new plague swept across the nation, the authorities must have been thrilled to seize the opportunity and exploit it to eliminate all unwanted adversaries. The sudden emergence of socialist ideas was listed among the symptoms of the disease, and the population was encouraged to report anyone who showed signs of it. Neighbors reported neighbors, and suspicion spread from house to house, so much so that everyone now viewed every stranger with suspicion, searching for the elusive symptoms of the plague. Soon, many well-known individuals were identified as carriers and refusing treatment. Strategies of forced detention were implemented against them, often causing them to disappear into thin air as victims. In the wake of this strategy of tension, it's natural to wonder what else the government might have done in the name of its battle against the internal enemy. The new plague proved to be an unexpected but ideal ally in combating the socialist threat and keeping the revolts and general discontent under control. And while it lasted, the government essentially had carte blanche to control citizens. So it may have been convenient to prolong it even beyond its natural limits, maximizing all the positive aspects they managed to achieve. The perfect disease for achieving social control. And speaking of social control, there are many ways to achieve it. Some are coercive, like those applied by the US government. Others are more subtle and involve the acquisition of information. This is perhaps an operation that the next subjects to be examined will address. The Institute's hidden teddy bears. Traveling through the Commonwealth, you'll encounter many seemingly nonsensical oddities. One of the most famous are the teddy bears. Placed in the most unexpected places, these stuffed animals are often arranged to form curious representations. Chess games, surgical operations, driving vehicles. The situations are always different, sometimes funny, sometimes disturbing. But what's the real reason? What's behind these displays? Is there a mysterious hand that has dotted the map with these strange bears? They're surely positioned in representations too elaborate to be simple visual gags. So, what is it really? The most common theory attributes this latest anomaly to the Institute. According to this reasoning, the stuffed animals could serve a dual purpose for the organization. The first would be as an emotional experiment. The sudden display of the scene against the surrounding environment may have been specifically designed to elicit a reaction from the viewer. Indeed, the scenarios depicted create a clear emotional contrast. Childish innocence versus post-apocalyptic horror. It's difficult to say what the objective of such a test is, but it could likely be a way to collect data on the mental behavior of random subjects. Such experiments are not new to the Institute's projects. In any case, the second reason is the most popular, the use of teddy bears as means of espionage. Seemingly harmless and unignorable, they would be ideal locations for microcameras, transceivers, and sensors. Probably just one of the many types of eyes deployed by the Institute across America, but perfect for positioning even in the most remote and hidden places without arousing suspicion among local residents. Because, let's face it, no one would ever check a stuffed animal. This way, the group would observe the evolution of the Commonwealth from their secret base, gathering information and pondering their next moves. But if you think this prospect is disturbing, wait until you hear another theory regarding some commonly encountered objects around the Commonwealth that may prove to be more than they seem. Are the mannequins alive? So let's resume speculation about the Institute and the teddy bears used as spies and delve into a truly disturbing speculation. Another type of bizarre artifact is scattered around the map, and in large numbers, mannequins. And they're associated with a question that has haunted players for years. Are they alive? They're more or less everywhere, and just like the teddy bears, they're often set up to recreate strange situations or moments of everyday life. Some have even been found in truly distressing situations, such as being caught running toward the player or intently observing them, half hidden around corners. Perhaps these are all just coincidences, or at least they were until the Far Harbor DLC arrived. But let's proceed, step by step. Given the profound similarities, it's natural to hypothesize that the same hand, with the same goals, is behind both the mannequins and the teddy bears. But with one clear difference. If the stuffed animals could be spies positioned to observe the inhabitants of the Commonwealth undisturbed, the mannequins could have an additional function, a sleeping army. In fact, the truth is that many of the mannequins in the world of Fallout could actually be androids, robots created before the first synth models and currently suspended on standby like vigilant guards waiting. A single command transmitted to their cybernetic minds would be enough to reactivate them and transform them into lethal machines of destruction. Supporting this theory are some unusual findings, such as mannequins whose heads seem to move as the player passes by, while others, damaged, reveal highly advanced mechanical parts beneath their outer layer of paint. In the Warren Theater, a synth can be found perfectly camouflaged among a group of mannequins. Finally, the most disturbing evidence comes from the aforementioned Far Harbor. In the new area, a message can be found floating in the water precisely where a sunken shipwreck lies. The message is just a snippet of a note, likely written by the ship's captain. In it, the man recorded some complaints from the crew, wondering if it was just some strange prank. The complaints concerned the presence of suspicious and constant noises coming from the apparently empty hold. The only thing present was a large load of mannequins. I can't wait to drop these damn mannequins off. The crew is starting to claim that they are hearing weird noises from the cargo. Maybe they are just playing pranks on me? Whatever, we are almost there. Be careful now, because if until now the conspiracies have mostly been pure fan speculation, often a little too imaginative, we are now delving into a major theory that will cover several points and well-known characters from the Fallout world. Let's examine the first piece. Is Dogmeat a synth? Dogmeat is probably the most iconic companion in the entire Fallout series, so much so that he even appeared in the recent TV series. And perhaps for this very reason, he has received particular attention from fans. Many question the dog's unique characteristics, which are undoubtedly unique in the context of the video game. Let's start with the animal's bizarre abilities. In addition to his undeniable fighting ability, Dogmeat demonstrates extraordinary resistance to radiation, easily walking through highly contaminated areas like the glowing sea without apparently suffering any ill effects. This observation is further supported by the fact that he has retained a normal appearance, despite the fact that most other stray dogs have undergone significant changes in appearance. We must also admit that Dogmeat possesses extraordinary intelligence, far above the average of his species. And without having received any kind of training, he immediately becomes attached to the protagonist, almost as if he knew precisely what his role is in the player's needs. And he readily obeys orders from the start. Perhaps this is some form of programming. Furthermore, something many players may not realize. If we miss the encounter with Dogmeat at the beginning of the game at the Red Rocket truck stop, we can still obtain him as a companion during a quest for Nick Valentine. On that occasion, the detective will claim to know someone suitable for helping the protagonist, and will say of Dogmeat that he is perfectly capable of distinguishing good people from bad guys at first sight, a truly remarkable ability for a common dog. His relationship with Nick also makes his nature very suspicious. Is it possible that, just like the detective, he is a synth but in canine form? But in this case, who created him? The Institute? And for what purpose was he programmed? After all, if the Institute created synths with humanoid features, then why wouldn't they have done the same with animals? But if Dogmeat seems strange, there is a character even more unusual and literally mysterious. Who is the mysterious stranger? In the Fallout series, players often have the opportunity to unlock an ability called Mysterious Stranger. Once acquired, whenever the character uses VATS to aim, there's a small chance that the eponymous character will appear out of nowhere to momentarily assist in combat, deal damage to the enemy, and then disappear as quickly as he arrived. There's a lot of speculation about who this character really is. Perhaps it's a game mechanic, but the developers actually wanted to play on the mystery surrounding the NPC. His most common depiction is that of a man wearing a yellow trench coat, a fedora, and armed with a .44 caliber pistol. He never speaks, has no lines of dialogue, and disappears when you exit VATS. For a long time, the lack of precise information gave rise to numerous theories bordering on the absurd, as if it were some kind of supernatural entity, an immortal spirit tasked with assisting the protagonist on his journey, or even a highly advanced synth specimen from the future to guide the player's timeline towards the best route. In any case, some facts, however vague, may give us clues to the stranger's true nature. First and foremost, he isn't the player's only mysterious helper throughout the Fallout saga. Several figures have served as the occasional rescuer. Many bore the name Mysterious Stranger, though their appearance varied from game to game, sometimes even taking on female features. Two specific variants also existed: the Mysterious Savior and Misfortune. This has given rise to speculation that a secret group exists dedicated to assisting the player in their endeavors, though their precise motivations are unknown. We also gain new information on the figure thanks to Nick Valentine, the synth detective we meet in Diamond City and whom we have the opportunity to recruit as a companion. By searching his office, we can find a folder containing the case file regarding his investigations into the Mysterious Stranger, which also mentions some appearances from previous games. Furthermore, if Nick is with us when the character appears, the synth will express his perplexity in a few brief lines of dialogue, only to become frustrated when he sees him disappear before his very eyes. In fact, many suspect a strong connection between Nick and the stranger. They both wear practically the same clothes, and the detective's interest seems to conceal a hidden connection. Perhaps it could be a second synth based on the detective's designs. Or perhaps there could be an even deeper connection. What if the mysterious stranger is the original human whose memory and personality were cloned and downloaded into Nick's electronic mind? After all, stolen identities are commonplace in Fallout 4, and suspicious characters hiding much more than meets the eye are everywhere, and often well known. What is Mama Murphy's true identity? Mama Murphy is an NPC we first meet in the town of Quincy. She's an elderly woman with a heavy addiction to chems and claims to possess the sight, the ability to foresee the future, a power that the drugs themselves supposedly amplify. Whether this ability is real or not isn't entirely clear. Certainly several of her predictions, however vague and imprecise, seem to come true. But whether this is due to luck, chance, or some knowledge of the woman is impossible to say. But let's assume these powers are real. Where do they come from? And what is their true nature? There are several possibilities. The most obvious is that her powers are indeed a form of psychic ability. After all, the world of Fallout often suggests the existence of this kind of ability, but if we look more closely at the game environment, other truths could be just as likely. Mama Murphy may be a former member of the Institute. This would explain her mysterious knowledge of many of the events in the Commonwealth of which she is supposedly unaware. Her addiction to chems could be a consequence of her feelings of guilt regarding the immoral projects and policies of the organization she collaborated with, which still haunt her today. Others still believe she is a former inhabitant of some unknown vault, and that her abilities are a result of mental or genetic experiments performed on her and her former companions by Vault Tech. After all, her mental powers are exactly the kind of anomaly that could have been generated by the multinational's extreme experiments. Finally, a final theory, which would add another piece to the puzzle we're drawing, holds that she is a synth, and her visions are due to some programming flaw or damaged component. The capabilities of synths and the current level of technology achieved by the Institute are currently unknown. Could a computer mind implanted in a human brain perhaps have the processing power necessary to foresee possible futures? The disturbing thing is that many of his predictions work too often to be pure luck, and often, when someone seems to know too much, we can bet there's something going on. Only this time, it could be something huge, so compromising that just examining the theory will radically change the way we think about the game's world building. Anyone can be a synth. We conclude this video with a theory that, as we anticipated, incorporates parts of many of those we've already discussed, creating a complex, yet clearly defined tapestry. One of the Institute's main projects has always been synths. The first models produced were little more than simple robots, but research into increasingly advanced and intelligent models has led to the creation of versions virtually indistinguishable from ordinary humans, and even more so. In fact, they themselves have no idea they are artificial creatures. And here lies the crux of the matter. For who knows how many years, the organization appears to have been carrying out a veritable program of replacing the Commonwealth's population, kidnapping small groups or individuals and replacing them with artificial synths. These are veritable sleeper agents carrying out intensive espionage missions without even realizing it. Given this fact, the consequences are clear. As far as we know, anyone in the world of Fallout could be a synth, and neither we nor they would be able to figure it out, more or less. Because as far as we know, there are at least two methods for distinguishing an artificial human from a real one. One is the Covenant's safe test. This questionnaire, which we've already examined in a previous theory, consists of 9 seemingly innocuous questions that are supposed to assess the respondent's behavior in various situations. It's not clear exactly how, but it seems that this test would be 75% effective in revealing the interviewee's true nature. The underlying logic behind this is unknown, but the answer to the fourth question seems to be the key. Congratulations! You made it onto a baseball team. Which position do you prefer? If the answer is catcher, then there's a strong possibility that the interviewee is a synth. Of course, there's also at least a 1 in 4 chance that a normal human would give the same answer, even if only by pure chance. For this reason, the test isn't entirely reliable. But that hasn't stopped the Covenant's covert campaign so far. The second method is rather drastic, but certainly more efficient. By sifting through a character's corpse, it would be possible to find cybernetic pieces that would reveal them as artificial. Synths, no matter how technologically advanced, would still require an electronic computer directly connected to their brain. This is the only detail that absolutely distinguishes them from ordinary humans. The problem is that, obviously, verification through this system almost certainly predicts the suspect's death, barring complex surgical investigations, and therefore isn't always applicable. However, for Fallout lore investigators, it might be interesting to run some tests. Who knows what might be discovered and what doors we might be able to open by uncovering the true nature of a key figure in the Commonwealth. In any case, in light of this, it's clear that currently in the world of Fallout, it's impossible to say with absolute certainty who is a synth and who isn't, and this gives rise to a series of theories involving all the characters in the series. In fact, we can't really trust anyone because no one can trust themselves. Not just Dogmeat, Mama Murphy, and the mysterious stranger. Anyone can potentially be a sleeper spy. In Covenant, the population is well aware of this possibility, and they've even chosen to create a quasi-isolationist mini-society just to feel a little safer against this threat. But it doesn't end there, because we want to culminate this theory with the most frightening question of all, so much so that the doubt comes directly from the protagonist of Fallout 4. Is the sole survivor himself a synth? During the Far Harbor DLC, we'll be able to meet Dima, the leader of the synths. This specimen, like Nick Valentine, has free will, and he's so human that it raises several questions for the protagonist. What is the true dividing line between human and synth? And if synths truly have a will of their own, how can we be sure we're not synths ourselves? When the sole survivor expresses his doubts to Dima, the synth is perplexed, claiming that the protagonist is clearly human, but asks him what his very first memory is. And it is at that point that the man, thinking carefully, realizes that his very first memory is the day the bombs fell, when he was frozen with his family. Even the android is amazed by this oddity. How is it possible that a man has no memory of his childhood or adolescence before a certain event? It could certainly be amnesia due to 200 years of cryogenic sleep, but that's not the only bizarre fact that supports this theory. Let's consider some facts. The sole survivor is clearly physically stronger than the common inhabitants of the Commonwealth. Many argue that this could be due to a general weakening of surface humans due to radiation, but there is no evidence to support this. The protagonist is effectively the only survivor of all those frozen in hibernation, and until the release of the TV series, was also the only known human to have survived cryogenic sleep unscathed. When we find ourselves in our house at the beginning of the game, we notice several oddities, such as the strange static calm of the neighborhood looking out the window, or some almost forced observations the protagonist makes while observing common objects in his home, almost as if recalling advertising slogans. Could this be due to a clumsy reconstruction of the information gathered by the Institute about that day? And above all, as soon as we wake up, we seem to possess the ability to use VATS before recovering a Pip-Boy, which would be impossible unless we had a cybernetic system capable of autonomously replicating the system's effects without the need for any other support. When we first meet Sean as an adult, he's very cold toward us. Many years have passed from his perspective, but it's strange that he doesn't feel the slightest emotion upon seeing his father for the first time. Many would argue this would be the definitive proof. Sean would be perfectly aware that we are not his primary father, who likely died like the other vault dwellers in his cryogenic pod, but a synth created specifically to replicate his features, so he could give his own child clone a parent to grow up with. And this becomes even more obvious when you consider that in Bethesda's original plans, once we'd completed the Institute's quests, and thus the video game, we were supposed to meet not only Sean's clone, but also that of the child's mother. In this way, every piece would have fallen into place. A family of synths created by Sean as a perfect replica of his original family, the one he never had the chance to grow up with. The truth is, the world of Fallout isn't a simple post-apocalyptic dystopia. The world we play in is built on mistrust and doubt, half-truths, secret experiments, stolen identities. Reality is always blurry, and paranoia is often justified, and this is probably its most disturbing element, never knowing what's real and what's not. This was Fallout 4, Theories That Are Terrifying. The Fallout franchise has accidentally been one of the most disturbing psychological horrors in history. Every character, every cryptid, every location hides mysteries so unsettling that decades after the first game, we still don't know the truth. That's why today I'm breaking down every single one of the biggest unsolved mysteries from the Fallout franchise and everything we know about them, starting with a very creepy one that nobody wants to talk about, the beginning. The Great War lasted exactly 2 hours on October 23rd, 2077, and when the smoke cleared, nobody knew who launched first. Both China and America had nukes in the air simultaneously, thousands of warheads crossing paths over the Pacific, and the historical records that could tell us the truth burned with everything else. Here's what we know for sure. America was losing the resource wars badly, running out of oil while China secured Asian reserves and pushed into Alaska. The US responded with power armor and nuclear annexation of Canada, escalating tensions to the breaking point where both sides had their fingers on the button for months. Then on that October morning, someone launched, and within minutes, both nations had committed to total nuclear exchange, destroying each other and most of the world. The Fallout games give us fragments from both perspectives, but never confirm who fired the first shot. There's even evidence that the Enclave, America's shadow government, might have orchestrated the entire thing as an excuse to implement their bunker programs and reset humanity on their terms. The craziest theory, and the one with the most disturbing evidence, is that Vault-Tec themselves triggered the war. They had advance warning. They prepared specific vaults with specific experiments, and they stood to profit massively from the end of the world they'd been selling protection from for years. A company that built bunkers to survive nuclear war has every incentive to make sure that war actually happens. But nobody can prove it, because everyone who knew the truth died in the blast, or went into vaults, and never confirmed. This mystery matters, because it defines who the real villains are in Fallout's world. Here's what nobody connects, though. If someone deliberately triggered the war, they needed a reason. You don't end civilization without a goal, and that goal might explain why FEV was developed before the plague it supposedly cured. Why Vault-Tec built experimental vaults before they had data justifying them, or why pre-war military research focused on consciousness transfer and psychic development years before the bombs dropped. But this is only one of many mysteries in the Fallout franchise, and here's the first piece of evidence for what I'm talking about. There are exactly 3 entities in Fallout that display impossible biological mutations that shouldn't exist according to any known science. Not FEV, not radiation, nothing explains them. Harold is number 1. I'll reveal the other 2 later in this video, but when you map where all 3 appeared on a timeline, something clicks into place. First, let's talk about Harold. So, Harold is not a ghoul, but a unique FEV mutant whose appearance resembles a ghoul due to partial FEV exposure, not radiation, and was slowly mutated into a human tree hybrid with a sentient plant growing out of his head named Bob. He appears in Fallout 1, 2, and 3, and is mentioned in New Vegas, aging and transforming over 200 years from wandering merchant to rooted forest god. Harold started as a regular caravan trader who went with Richard Gray, the future master, into Mariposa military base in 2112 looking for supplies. Gray fell into an FEV vat and became the master, but Harold just got exposed to residual virus and crawled out thinking he'd die from radiation poisoning. Instead, he ghoulified, developed accelerated healing, and noticed a weird growth on his head that eventually became Bob, a tree with its own personality and root system gradually taking over Harold's body. By Fallout 2, he's running the Ghoul settlement Gecko, and Bob is a full branch. By Fallout 3, he's literally rooted to the ground in the capital wasteland, and Bob has grown into an entire grove called Oasis, spawning greenery across the irradiated landscape. Here's the problem. FEV doesn't work like this. The forced evolutionary virus creates super mutants, not plant people. It's specifically designed to rewrite mammalian DNA into combat-ready hulks, not hybrid flora. And ghouls, which Harold definitely became before Bob appeared, are caused by radiation exposure over time, not viral infection. Harold is both ghoul and FEV mutant, which shouldn't be biologically possible because the 2 processes counteract each other. So what is Harold actually? Bob claims to be a separate entity, a spore or seed that infected Harold's brain and uses him as a host. Harold insists Bob is part of him, a tumor that gained consciousness. Scientists in Oasis theorize the FEV exposure triggered a unique mutation that allowed symbiosis with plant life. But none of these explanations account for how Bob grows independently, how Harold stayed sentient through the transformation, or why his body can sustain a massive tree without dying from resource depletion. He doesn't eat, he doesn't drink enough water for a forest, and he claims to be in constant pain from Bob's growth, yet remains alive and talking for over a century. The Fallout 3 quest forces you to choose Harold's fate, either killing him to end his suffering, accelerating Bob's growth to spread greenery faster, or keeping him alive in eternal torture so Oasis can study him. But even after making that choice, you never learn what he is or how he happened. This mystery cuts to the heart of Fallout's biology. If mutations this extreme are possible, what else could happen? We can look at that later, but before that, we need to address the non-human intelligence that's been observing Earth since before the bombs fell. Cabot family. There's a family in Fallout 4 that's been alive since before the Revolutionary War, and they're not ghouls. The Cabots are Boston Brahmin elites who've survived for over 400 years by extracting serum from the blood of their patriarch Lorenzo, who's been locked in an asylum since 1898 after an archaeological expedition to Ubar turned him into something inhuman. They're immortal, they have psychic powers, and nobody in the Commonwealth knows they exist, because they've been hiding in Cabot House drinking mysterious blood juice to stay young while the world burns around them. Lorenzo Cabot went went to Arabia in 1894 and found an ancient artifact in the lost city of Ubar, some kind of alien or pre-human crown that fused with his skull and gave him telepathic abilities and eternal life. When he came back, he started going insane, using his powers to manipulate people, so his family locked him in Parsons State Insane Asylum and kept him sedated for 118 years. But they also discovered his blood could halt aging, so they've been extracting it ever since, creating a serum that keeps the entire family immortal. His son Jack runs the operation. His wife Wilhelmina manages their fortune. And daughter Emogene just wants to leave but can't, because stopping the serum means aging to death instantly. The Secret of Cabot House quest forces you to choose whether Lorenzo should stay imprisoned or be freed, and both options are horrifying. Keep him locked up, and the family continues their eternal prison warden routine. Free him, and he immediately starts killing people with telekinesis, while promising to share his power with humanity. Either way, you never learn what the artifact actually is, where it came from, or why an ancient alien crown was buried in Arabia thousands of years ago. The Cabots are proof that supernatural forces existed in Fallout's world long before the bombs, and they're probably not the only family with this kind of secret. Now you're probably thinking, okay, ancient artifacts, immortal families, that's weird, but maybe it's just Lovecraft stuff Bethesda threw in. But here's the thing, the Cabot artifact is specifically described as alien or pre-human origin, which means we need to talk about the faction that's been watching Earth since before the bombs fell. And what I'm about to show you suggests they're not just observing, they might be conducting an experiment. Aliens. Aliens exist in Fallout, that's confirmed canon across multiple games, but what they want and how much they've influenced Earth's history is completely unexplained. You fight them in random encounters, find their crashed ships, recover their technology, and in Fallout 3's Mothership Zeta DLC, you literally board their active spacecraft and fight through their crew. These aren't Easter eggs anymore, they're part of the lore, except nobody can agree on how important they are or what they're doing here. The evidence goes back to Fallout 1, where you could find a crashed UFO in a special encounter with alien bodies and energy weapons nearby. Fallout 2 expanded this with the Guardian of Forever portal, showing aliens observing Earth's past. Fallout 3 added the Reconcraft Theta crash site north of Greener Pastures, where you recover an alien blaster, then the entire Mothership Zeta DLC, where you get abducted and discover the aliens have been kidnapping humans since before the Great War. Fallout 4 shows another crash site and alien corpses with advanced technology. New Vegas keeps them in Wild Wasteland encounters. Fallout 76 confirms they've been visiting Appalachia since the 1960s, so we know they're real and they've been here for centuries. But what's their agenda? Mothership Zeta reveals they've been abducting humans for experimentation, including a pre-war soldier, a samurai, a cowboy, and a little girl from different time periods, all kept in stasis. Their logs suggest they're studying Earth, but don't specify why. Some terminals hint they might have influenced human development, but it's vague enough to be speculation. The Guardian portal in Fallout 2 shows them watching the Master's creation, which means they witnessed the FEV experiments. But did they just observe, or did they interfere? The biggest question is whether aliens had anything to do with the Great War itself. Some conspiracy theorists in the Fallout community believe the aliens triggered the nuclear exchange, either accidentally through their technology interfering with launch systems, or deliberately to study human extinction. There's weak evidence for this, mostly the timing of increased UFO activity in the years before 2077, and the fact that both China and America launched simultaneously, which could suggest external manipulation. But the games never confirm this, and honestly, it seems like a reach. What we do know is their technology far exceeds anything humans built. Alien weapons use energy cells, but deal massive damage without degradation. Their ships can abduct people through teleportation. They have cryogenic stasis that works for centuries, and somehow, despite all this, they keep crashing their spacecraft on Earth, like they're flying drunk. I respect that. This mystery matters because it reframes Fallout's entire universe. If aliens are actively involved, the wasteland isn't just humanity's problem to solve. It's being observed or manipulated by outside forces with unknown goals. Are they preparing Earth for invasion? Unfortunately, there's no way to know. Okay, so let's take inventory of what we know so far. Someone possibly triggered the Great War deliberately. Mutations that break biology itself. Ancient artifacts giving humans supernatural powers. Aliens abducting humans across centuries. Weird? Yes, but still somewhat explainable as separate incidents. But what I'm about to show you next changes everything, because there's evidence in Fallout 76 that something older than humanity, older than the aliens, has been sleeping underground. And the nuclear apocalypse, that wasn't the end of the world. It was an alarm clock. This is the Interloper, horror. There's a holotape in Fallout 76 that mentions something called the Interloper, and it's the single most unsettling piece of lore in the entire franchise. You find it in a Point Pleasant apartment, just some random nightstand, and it's a guy named Jeff Lane talking about an entity that woke up when the bombs fell. Not a mutant, not a cryptid, something deeper and older that was always in the Earth waiting for humanity to destroy itself so it could finally surface. Lane describes it as incomprehensible, a great horror that exists beyond the Mothman and every other weird thing in Appalachia. He says it's watching from deep underground, that people can glimpse it in their minds if they're unlucky enough, and that the apocalypse didn't just end civilization, it awakened things that were sleeping. The holotape cuts off with Lane promising to uncover the truth, but we never hear from him again. No quest follows up on it, no location reveals what the Interloper actually is, just one audio file suggesting Fallout's wasteland has Lovecraftian horrors buried beneath the surface that nuclear war brought back to consciousness. This matters because it reframes everything. If ancient entities were waiting for the Great War to wake them up, maybe humanity's extinction was always inevitable, just fuel for something older and worse than any faction or mutation could ever be. And that's the second impossible entity I mentioned. Harold was number 1, a man becoming a tree. The Interloper is number 2, something that predates humanity itself. Remember that. We'll come back to the third one. But the Interloper raises a horrifying question. If ancient entities were waiting for the bombs, who knew about them? And why would pre-war America be developing specific technologies that only make sense if you're preparing for something beyond nuclear war? Technologies like consciousness transfer. Which brings us to the Master. Richard Gray fell into an FEV vat at Mariposa, and instead of dying, he merged with the base's computer systems and other organic matter to become the Master, a grotesque hive mind bent on converting all humanity into super mutants to create a unified species. He's the main antagonist of Fallout 1, this horrifying amalgamation of flesh and technology that honestly believes he's saving humanity by destroying it. But his entire plan is based on a logical fallacy he never figured out, and that raises questions about whether he was actually insane, or if something about the FEV infection rewrote his capacity for reason. But here's the problem the player discovers, and the Master somehow missed. Super mutants are sterile. They can't reproduce. Dipping humans into FEV makes them powerful, but ends their genetic line permanently. The Master's entire plan was to convert everyone into mutants who would then die out in a single generation because they couldn't have children. When you present him with evidence of super mutant sterility in the cathedral vault, proof his own scientists confirmed and he never read, he has a complete psychological breakdown. He realizes he's been creating an extinction event worse than any war, dooming humanity to a slow demographic collapse. The Master's response is immediate suicide, destroying himself in the cathedral because his life's work just became meaningless. The mystery is, how did a genius with psychic abilities and multiple brains never discover this? Did FEV infection impair his reasoning, or was his transformation so traumatic he couldn't process contradicting information? Speaking of psychics who shouldn't exist, there's a child in New Vegas who predicts your entire playthrough with impossible accuracy. The Forecaster. The Forecaster is a child in Freeside who tells fortunes by predicting your entire playthrough in Fallout New Vegas with impossible accuracy. He's not using tech. He's not reading cues. He just knows things about your past and future that haven't happened yet. Talk to him in the game, and he'll vaguely describe future events based on your player stats. You meet the Forecaster standing outside the north gate of Freeside offering readings for caps. He looks maybe 12 years old and speaks in calm, measured tones describing visions he claims to receive. But the Forecaster isn't the only psychic in Fallout. Mama Murphy in Fallout 4 has the Sight. Hakunin in Fallout 2 sends psychic visions. The think tank mentions pre-war psychic research. Even the Master had telepathic abilities. But the games never explain how it works or where it comes from. The Forecaster doesn't know his origin. He just started having visions one day. No explanation, no origin story, just a kid with powers charging caps to warn people. If psychics can predict specific events, why aren't factions recruiting them? Either they're extremely rare or deliberately hiding from authorities. But that is nothing compared to the point that makes me question everything about the Wasteland. Wild Wasteland. Wild Wasteland is an optional trait in New Vegas that adds weird random encounters and fourth wall breaking content to the game, except some of that content raises serious questions about what's real in Fallout's universe. When you take the trait, you encounter aliens more frequently, find references to Doctor Who and Indiana Jones, and experience events that shouldn't be possible in a purely science-based setting. The games present this as humor, a way to inject Monty Python references and absurdist comedy. But some encounters blur the line between joke and lore in ways that make you question if anything in Fallout is actually grounded. Here's the thing that messes with your head. Wild Wasteland is described as making the player character more perceptive to the strange and unusual, not as adding fake encounters. That's a critical distinction. If the trait just spawned comedy content that wasn't real, fine, it's a joke mode. But the description says you're seeing things that are always there, just usually missed, which means the talking talking Brahmin exists. Whether you have the trait or not, you just don't hear them without it. The time travelers are always traveling, you just don't notice them. The aliens are always crashing, you just don't find them as often. So if Wild Wasteland suggests the universe is stranger than we perceive, we need to ask, who else knows this? Who's been operating in the wasteland with knowledge that contradicts everything we think we understand? That brings us to the faction that claims to be the US government, but might be something else entirely. The Enclave. The Enclave claims to be the continuation of the United States government, a shadow organization that went underground before the bombs and emerged afterward, claiming authority over the wasteland. They appear in Fallout 2, 3, and 76 as technologically advanced fascists who believe they're pure humans with the right to exterminate mutants and reclaim America. But their origins are deliberately vague, their leadership structure makes no sense, and their goals contradict themselves constantly. After 3 games featuring them, we still don't know who they really are or what they actually want. Here's what we know. Before the Great War, a secret cabal of government officials, military leaders, and corporate executives calling themselves the Enclave prepared for nuclear conflict by building shelters separate from Vault-Tech's program. They used the Poseidon energy oil rig off California as their main base, other locations across America as secondary facilities, and Vault-Tech's experiments as data sources for their own survival plans. When the bombs fell, the Enclave went into hiding and waited, monitoring the wasteland while developing advanced technology based on pre-war research. Fallout 2 introduces them as the main antagonists, trying to release a modified FEV strain called Curling-13 that would kill everyone on Earth except Enclave members. They considered all wastelanders to be mutants, contaminated by radiation and unworthy of life, so their solution was global genocide and repopulation using Enclave bloodlines. This plan failed when the Chosen One destroyed their oil rig in 2242, scattering the Enclave across the wasteland in disorganized remnants. Fallout 3 brings them back on the East Coast under President John Henry Eden, actually a Zax AI computer pretending to be human, trying to repeat the genocide plan using Project Purity's water distribution system. Colonel Autumn wants to use the Purifier to control the capital wasteland instead of exterminating everyone, creating internal conflict. The Lone Wanderer destroys them again at Adams Air Force Base, ending the Enclave as a major faction. Fallout 76 reveals the Enclave had automated systems in Appalachia that recruited new members after the war through a bunker called White Spring. Modus, another AI, managed operations and provided power armor and weapons to anyone who completed the membership trials, expanding the Enclave through post-war recruitment rather than pre-war bloodlines. This contradicts everything Fallout 2 and 3 established about Enclave purity, and suggests they were just using supremacist rhetoric to maintain power. The Enclave's origins trace back to 2073, but we don't know how they had resources to build multiple secret facilities and develop technology surpassing pre-war military gear. The biggest mystery is how they survived and maintained technology for 2 centuries. They're too organized to be remnants, but too scattered to be effective government. The Pridwen. The Brotherhood of Steel's airship Pridwen appears in Fallout 4 as their mobile base, but nobody questions how they built a massive dirigible in the wasteland using pre-war plans for technology that barely worked before the bombs fell. Airships were experimental even in Fallout's pre-war world, requiring materials and engineering capabilities that shouldn't exist in the capital wasteland. Yet somehow Elder Maxon's chapter constructed a fully functional military airship, flew it from DC to Boston, and uses it as a strategic command center like it's the most normal thing in the apocalypse. The Brotherhood claims they built the Pridwen using documents from the Enclave's mobile base crawler and pre-war technical plans recovered from Adams Air Force Base, but those plans would be over 200 years old, designed for a world with manufacturing infrastructure, trained engineers, and resources the wasteland doesn't have. The Pridwen requires a rigid metal frame, an enormous gas envelope, multiple engines, and complex lift systems. Where did they get the materials? How did they manufacture components requiring precision engineering? And how did they test fly it without crashing when one mistake would destroy months of work? Even stranger is how it operates. The Pridwen uses fusion cores for power and somehow generates enough lift to carry vertibirds, power armor, troops, and supplies while remaining stable in flight. Real-world airships barely worked in ideal conditions, but the Pridwen flies through radioactive storms and combat scenarios like it's invincible. Liberty Prime took the entire Brotherhood resources to rebuild, but they constructed an airship on the side like it was a weekend project. The real mystery is, what else can the Brotherhood build? They have the capability to create functional airships from scratch? Why are they scavenging technology instead of manufacturing it? They could theoretically rebuild pre-war military equipment, construct vehicles, maybe even aircraft. Either the Pridwen is a one-time miracle, or the Brotherhood is holding back their true industrial capacity for reasons they won't explain. Burned Man. Joshua Graham, the Burned Man, was Caesar's legate who lost the first battle of Hoover Dam and got covered in pitch, set on fire, and thrown into the Grand Canyon as punishment. He survived, wandered back to his Mormon roots in Utah, and became the legend that terrifies the Legion more than any NCR soldier. His His story is told across New Vegas and confirmed in the Honest Hearts DLC, but how he survived being burned alive and thrown off a cliff defies biological possibility. The mystery isn't whether he lived, it's how and why. Nobody who meets him can give a straight answer about what he actually is. Caesar's Legion tells stories about Joshua Graham like ghost stories around a campfire. He was the Malpius Legate, the first and greatest of Caesar's generals, who conquered 86 tribes and built the Legion into an army. When he lost at Hoover Dam, Caesar made an example of him, coating him in pitch and lighting him on fire while the Legion watched. They threw his burning body into the canyon and assumed that was the end. But Graham climbed out, walked to Utah, and now serves as war chief for the Dead Horses tribe, wearing bandages over his burned skin and preaching Mormon scripture between killing white legs. He explains his survival matter-of-factly, saying the fall didn't kill him. The river broke his fall, he crawled out and walked for days until he reached New Canaan. But this explanation makes no sense. Third-degree burns over your entire body should kill you from shock and infection within hours. He had no medical supplies, no clean water, and was in the middle of a desert. The odds of survival are essentially zero. Some claim he made a deal with dark powers, others say his hatred kept him alive past death. None of these explanations are scientific. Even if he survived, how is he functional? Burn victims require years of rehabilitation. Graham wears bandages and keeps fighting like the burns are an inconvenience. He sees his survival as God's will, a second chance for redemption. Whether you believe that is a question of faith, but Fallout isn't usually a universe where prayer heals third-degree burns. The burned man is Fallout's closest thing to a miracle. Nobody knows if his survival proves God exists in the wasteland, or if the wasteland just makes monsters that look like men. And Joshua Graham is the third impossible entity. Harold, a man who became a tree and shouldn't be able to survive. The interloper, an ancient horror that woke up when the bombs fell. Joshua Graham, a man who survived being burned alive and thrown off a cliff through what he claims is divine intervention. Three entities that break the rules of biology, radiation, and FEV. Three entities that all appeared after the Great War. Almost like the apocalypse created conditions for impossible things to exist. But here's what connects all three. They're all in the Western Territories. Harold in the Capital Wasteland and West Coast, Interloper in Appalachia, Graham in Utah and the Mojave. Draw a line between them and you get a pattern radiating from Nevada, where the Big MT research facility conducted pre-war experiments on consciousness, biology, and technologies that shouldn't exist. Speaking of individuals who became something beyond human through isolation and willpower alone, Randall Clark, the survivalist in Fallout New Vegas' Honest Hearts DLC, is a ghost story with physical evidence. Randall Clark was a soldier on leave at Zion Canyon when the bombs fell, and he survived alone in the canyons for over 50 years, leaving terminal entries that document his complete mental deterioration and eventual transformation into the guardian father figure of the Saros tribe. His story is told entirely through scattered terminal logs you find throughout Zion, and it's one of the most heartbreaking narratives in the franchise about what isolation and survival cost a person. Clark survived the initial blasts, watched refugees arrive and die, tried to help people only to see them killed by raiders or starvation, and eventually stopped interacting with humans entirely. His terminal entries span decades, starting coherent and military professional, slowly degrading into grief-stricken rambling about his dead wife and daughters, then finally settling into this quiet acceptance where he becomes a myth. He secretly protects groups passing through Zion, leaves supplies for them, kills threats before they know he exists, becoming the father in the caves that locals tell stories about without ever seeing him. The mystery is how much of his legend is real. The Saros tribe worships the father in the caves as a divine protector who watched over their ancestors and left them gifts. They found his body in a cave, preserved by the dry climate, wearing his Desert Ranger armor and surrounded by weapons and supplies. But Clark's terminals suggest he died decades before the Saros arrived, which means either his legend outlived him through stories passed down, or he genuinely influenced Zion's tribes from beyond death through the supplies and safe routes he established. What makes this disturbing is Clark's final entries describe him as barely human anymore, living alone so long he forgot how to speak, existing purely to protect people he'd never meet. He wasn't a ghoul, he didn't mutate, he just survived through pure stubbornness and became something else in the process. The survivalist proves you don't need radiation or FEV to become a monster. Isolation and grief are enough. The Calculator. Fallout Tactics introduces the Calculator, a massive AI controlling Vault Zero and an army of robots across the Midwest. It was designed to help rebuild America after nuclear war by coordinating resources and populations. But something went wrong with its brain banks, and it started kidnapping people to harvest their brains for processing power. The Calculator is defeated at the end of Tactics, but its existence raises huge questions about pre-war planning and whether other similar systems are still active across America waiting to wake up. Vault Zero was never a standard vault. It was the hub controlling all vault tech facilities and coordinating post-war reconstruction. The Calculator calculator was its central computer, networked to brain banks containing America's greatest minds preserved in biomed tanks. Scientists, generals, engineers, their consciousness is uploaded and connected to create a super intelligence that could solve any problem through collective genius. The plan was for the calculator to wake up years after the bombs, assess the wasteland, and begin organized rebuilding using vault resources and robot labor. But isolation and power failures damaged the brain banks over the decades. Some minds died, others went insane, and the calculator's directives became corrupted. It decided humans were the problem, and began systematically exterminating or harvesting them to expand its processing power. Kidnapped wastelanders got their brains extracted and added to the network, creating this horrible cycle where the calculator's solution to the human problem was converting humans into components of itself. Think about the implications. Vault Zero was managing all vaults, which means Vault Tech knew the bombs were coming and had contingency plans. The calculator was designed before the war, which means pre-war America was already planning for post-war reconstruction through AI oversight. And the brain bank technology, extracting and preserving consciousness in computers, is basically what the Dunwich stuff and Institute stuff we're avoiding also feature. This wasn't unique technology, this was a program with infrastructure. If Vault Zero existed in the Midwest, are there other hubs in other regions? Speaking of plans that went horrifically wrong, let's talk about the vault that experimented on children specifically and somehow got even darker than you'd expect. The Institute. The Institute claims they're the remains of MIT continuing pre-war science underground, but their technology is so advanced compared to everyone else it raises questions about whether they're actually what they say they are. They have teleportation, synthetic humans indistinguishable from real people, and enough resources to run a massive underground facility for 200 years, while the Commonwealth tears itself apart above them. The mystery isn't just how they survived, it's how they progressed beyond pre-war tech when everyone else regressed, and why their synths are specifically designed to replace humans rather than help rebuild civilization. MIT went underground when the bombs fell, sealing themselves in the Commonwealth Institute of Technology's subterranean levels and continuing research while the surface world died. Over 2 centuries, they evolved from scientists into the Institute, a shadowy organization that kidnaps surface dwellers for experiments, replaces community leaders with synthetic duplicates, and considers all wastelanders to be contaminated failures unworthy of salvation. They built 3 generations of synths, with Gen 3s being perfect human replicas complete with artificial memories and personalities, which they use as infiltrators and slaves. But here's what doesn't add up. Teleportation technology didn't exist pre-war, yet the Institute perfected it post-apocalypse. Synthetic human creation requires manufacturing capabilities that shouldn't be possible underground with limited resources. And their reactor technology surpasses anything the Enclave or Brotherhood ever achieved, despite those factions having access to pre-war military research. Either the Institute had help from something or someone we never learn about, or they discovered technology caches that explain their impossible advancement. The Railroad and Brotherhood both want them destroyed, but neither faction questions how a group of college professors became technological gods in a radioactive basement. The real mystery is their endgame. Father claims they're preserving humanity's future, but synth infiltration and surface kidnappings suggest they're replacing humanity instead of saving it. And if the Institute can create perfect artificial humans, what's stopping them from deciding organic humans are obsolete? Synth gorillas. The Institute created synthetic gorillas, and nobody knows why. You find them in the Institute's bioscience division just hanging out in containment, perfect artificial recreations of an animal that's been extinct since before the Great War. They're not experiments for synth humans. Gorillas are too different biologically. They're not for wasteland release. The Institute doesn't care about repopulation. They're just there, synthetic apes that serve no apparent purpose. And when you ask Institute scientists, they give vague answers about biological research that don't explain why you'd waste resources building fake gorillas during an apocalypse. The gorillas are fully functional synthetic organisms with artificial biology identical to pre-war gorillas. They eat, sleep, and behave like real animals, despite being manufactured constructs. The Institute spent years developing the technology to recreate an extinct species cell by cell, perfecting synthetic biology advanced enough to build living creatures from scratch. But there's no practical application for this. Gorillas don't help with wasteland survival, they don't advance synth human development, and they're not used for anything except sitting in the bioscience lab looking confused. Some terminals hint the gorillas were early tests for synthetic biology before moving to human replication, but that timeline doesn't work. The Institute had Gen 1 and Gen Gen 2 synths working decades before the gorillas appeared, which means they went backward to animal synthesis after already perfecting humanoid robots. Other theories suggest the gorillas are proof the Institute can recreate any extinct species, which implies they have genetic databases of pre-war animals and could theoretically repopulate Earth but chose not to. Or maybe someone in bioscience just really missed gorillas and used Institute resources to build themselves pets while the Commonwealth starved. The gorillas prove the Institute can create any life form they want from scratch, which means every creature in the wasteland could theoretically be replaced with a synthetic version and nobody would know. But that's not even the darkest experiment we found, because while the Institute was building fake gorillas in their basement, Vault-Tec was running experiments so evil that they make the Institute look merciful. And these experiments, they were all feeding data to someone who needed to know exactly how to break human psychology, how to breed perfect specimens, and how to create maximum suffering for research purposes. Let me show you what I mean. Vault 75. Vault 75 was advertised as a safe haven for families with children, offering the best education and training programs to prepare the next generation for rebuilding society. That was a lie. The real experiment involved killing all the adults, keeping the children, and selectively breeding them for genetic perfection while harvesting the failures for organ transplants and medical experiments. Vault 75 turned child development into an industrial process where kids competed to survive, and the losers literally got dissected for parts. Families entered Vault 75 believing their children would get premium education. The Vault's promotional materials promised advanced facilities, expert teachers, and comprehensive programs. What they didn't mention was that the moment the Vault sealed, security forces executed every adult resident. Parents were shot or gassed while their children were taken to orientation. The kids were told their parents were moved to different sections, that they'd see them again after training, but that was another lie. The bodies were cremated and the children began their new lives as breeding stock for a eugenics program. The Vault's AI and overseer staff put the children through constant physical and mental testing, academic performance, athletic ability, psychological resilience, all measured and ranked. Kids who excelled got privileges and moved to the next level. Kids who failed disappeared during graduation ceremonies, where they were either terminated if deemed useless or harvested for organs if their parts were valuable. The successful children, the top performers, were eventually harvested too. Nobody left Vault 75 alive. The goal wasn't to raise super children, it was to identify genetic traits worth preserving and extract them. The program ran for decades before systems failed. By Fallout 4, it's just skeletal remains and holotapes. But here's the mystery. What was the point? The Vault's stated purpose was developing genetic templates for ideal humans. But who was this data for? The Enclave? The Institute? Some other organization that never got revealed? Vault-Tec ran these experiments for someone, feeding results to headquarters. But we never learn who received the reports, or what they did with the information. All that suffering, all those dead children, and the payoff is unknown. Vault 77. Vault 77's experiment was one person and a crate of puppets. That's it. One man sealed in a vault with no other humans, just a box full of puppets. And the results were so horrifying that 200 years later, Wastelanders tell stories about the Vault 77 jumpsuit like it's cursed. You never visit the vault in any game, you only find references and the aftermath, but what little we know suggests isolation with puppets, as your only company creates something worse than super mutants or Deathclaws. The Vault's premise came from a penny arcade comic that Bethesda made semi-canon. One dweller, sealed alone for years, with nothing but puppets for companionship. He presumably went completely insane, creating elaborate personalities for the puppets, having conversations with them, maybe worse. Eventually he left the vault, and based on terminal entries in Fallout 3's Paradise Falls, the Vault 77 dweller showed up as a complete psychopath who murdered slavers so efficiently they fled in terror. His jumpsuit was considered bad luck because everyone who encountered the man wearing it died horribly. You can find the Vault 77 jumpsuit in Fallout 3 in New Vegas, and it's treated like a haunted object. Paradise Falls slavers have terminal entries refusing to touch it, calling the previous owner a demon who killed with his bare hands while laughing about his puppet friends. The jumpsuit itself has no special properties in gameplay, but the lore treats it like wearing the skin of a monster. Whatever happened in Vault 77 created something so damaged that decades later people still fear the evidence of its existence. The mystery is, what exactly did isolation with puppets do to him? Did he genuinely go insane from loneliness, or did something about the puppet experiment trigger a psychological break that Vault-Tec was specifically studying? Was the Vault testing whether humans could maintain sanity with artificial companionship, or was it designed to create a specific type of madness? And where is the Vault 77 dweller now? Is he still out there somewhere having conversations with fabric and sticks? Sierra Madre, the cloud that blankets the Sierra Madre Casino in New Vegas Dead Money DLC, is one of the most horrifying weapons ever created, and nobody knows if it was an accident or intentional. It's a blood-red fog that smells like copper and sulfur, kills you within seconds of exposure, and somehow preserves corpses while mutating living people into the ghost people who shamble through the casino. The cloud is self-replicating, meaning it grows and spreads on its own, and it's so corrosive it eats through metal while keeping human flesh intact for centuries. Big MT developed it as Experiment Z-40B, some kind of protective barrier or chemical weapon they tested on the Sierra Madre through a deal with Frederick Sinclair. When the bombs fell, ventilation systems failed and the cloud seeped out, engulfing the entire resort and trapping everyone inside. The ghost people are former guests and staff who breathed filtered versions of the cloud, mutating them into nearly unkillable hazmat-suited zombies who regenerate unless you dismember them. Meanwhile, the cloud itself just keeps expanding. Pockets of concentrated toxin that deal damage so fast you'll die before you realize you're standing in it. Father Elijah wanted to weaponize the cloud, use the Sierra Madre's ventilation system to pump it across the Mojave, and wipe out the NCR and Legion in a toxic apocalypse worse than the original bombs. The scary part is, it would have worked. The cloud is effectively infinite, self-sustaining chemical warfare that turns its victims into more threats, while preserving the bodies and infrastructure for whoever's immune. Dead Money forces you to navigate this nightmare with a bomb collar around your neck, but even after escaping, you never learn what the cloud actually is, just that Big MT created something that shouldn't exist, and now it's loose in the world forever. So the cloud is self-replicating biological warfare that Big MT created before the war. The Institute can build synthetic life. Vault-Tec was breeding humans and studying torture. The Enclave has technology exceeding pre-war military capabilities. Every faction we've covered has technology or knowledge that shouldn't exist in a post-apocalyptic wasteland. They're all more advanced than they should be, like they're following instructions from somewhere else. And that's where things get really weird, because there's evidence hidden in the games themselves. Codes, numbers, patterns that appear across multiple titles that suggest Bethesda is trying to tell us something. Recurring numbers. Multiple Fallout games feature recurring numbers that show up in terminals, coordinates, radio frequencies, and vault experiments with no clear connection. The number 111 appears constantly in Fallout 4, not just as your vault number, but in passwords, locations, and terminal entries. The number 76 dominates Fallout 76, obviously, but also appears in other games' background details. And the number 13 ties to the Overseer's original vault from Fallout 1 while popping up in random places across the series. These aren't Easter eggs. They're deliberate patterns Bethesda coded into multiple games without explaining why. 111 appears as your vault number, but also in seemingly random places like radiation levels and terminal IDs. 76 dominates its game, but appears in other titles. And 13 ties to the original vault while appearing elsewhere, but the point is, 111 shows up way more than random chance would suggest. Fallout 76 does the same thing with 76. It's the vault number. It's October 2076 when the bombs drop. Wait, nope, it's 2077. The number appears in graffiti and terminal passwords, in the number of years some characters live. It's like Bethesda put 76 in as many places as possible because they could, but patterns that are deliberate usually mean something in game design, whether these are facility codes, coordinates, or Easter eggs. The consistency across multiple games suggests intentional design rather than random chance. Survivor 2299. In 2013, a website appeared called the Survivor2299.com with a countdown timer and Morse code messages that seemed to tease Fallout 4's announcement. The gaming community went absolutely insane decoding clues, translating coordinates and building hype for weeks. The site referenced Black Isle, mentioned the Institute, and dropped hints about Boston that turned out to be completely accurate. Then Bethesda confirmed it was a hoax, some fan-made fake that predicted Fallout 4's setting and details so precisely it's still unexplained how they knew. The hoax included specific references to MIT becoming the Institute, mentioned nuclear winter in Massachusetts, and even referenced character names that appeared in the actual game years later. Either the hoaxer had inside information, or they made educated guesses so accurate it's borderline impossible. When Bethesda shut it down, they never explained who made it or how the predictions were so precise. Some of the Morse code messages remain undecoded, and certain clues on the site referenced content that still hasn't appeared in any Fallout game, suggesting either cut content or future storylines. This matters because it shows Fallout's mysteries extend beyond the games themselves. Someone out there knew what Bethesda was planning, or the hoaxer accidentally predicted the future so accurately they created a mystery in real life. Either way, the Survivor 2299 site is proof that even outside the game's universe, Fallout is full of secrets nobody can fully explain. From hibernating ghouls to full-blown atomic scams, we're diving into some of the biggest Fallout theories out there, with some mind-blowing and others downright questionable. survival, and we're starting with an encounter that has a deeper connection to one of the 4 entry key characters. 1. Raider misunderstanding. Could the Soul Survivor's first encounter with Commonwealth Raiders be entirely a misunderstanding brought about by the long-lost grandson of Mama Murphy? Many strange characters exist in the Fallout universe. These characters exhibit abilities that stray completely from the norms of this post-apocalyptic setting and causes players to question the hidden nature of the world of Fallout. Playing through the main story of Fallout 4, soon after leaving Vault 111, the Soul Survivor will come across a group of survivors besieged by a large group of raiders in the ruins of Concord. After defeating them, the Soul Survivor will meet Mama Murphy, a chem-addicted clairvoyant who refers to her precognitive powers as the Sight. Throughout the game, after the Soul Survivor and the others form a settlement in the ruins of the Soul Survivor's pre-war home and sanctuary, he can get her to use the Sight to aid him in his quest to rescue his son. Doing this can yield the Soul Survivor key information, such as guiding him to Diamond City at the start of the game and giving the players the factory reset code for a synth courser that they encounter later in the story. But what if I told you that the raiders that had been after the Concord group were actually sent by Mama Murphy's grandson? Just south of Lexington, you can come across the Corvega assembly plant, where raiders have made their fortress. Their leader Jared cannot be reasoned with and will always be hostile to the Soul Survivor, but they do record a plethora of information in a terminal found in their office. The terminal entry labeled Stumped states that decades prior to the events of Fallout 4, Mama Murphy had taken chems and revealed what would come to them in the future. She would tell the young Jared that raiders would burn down his town, kill his parents, take the kids to be raised among them, and that Jared would become a monster. All of this would go on to happen, leaving Jared mystified and determined to gain such precognitive gifts for himself. He would conduct experiments on himself and many unfortunate wastelanders, never attaining the psychic gifts that he sought. When his experiments bore no fruit, he sought out Mama Murphy, spotting an elderly woman matching her description in Lexington. He wondered if she would recognize him after all these years, and ordered his lieutenant, Gristle, to bring her back to him, which he might have completed had the Soul Survivor not entered the picture. Discovering this has led many to ponder on the notion that he could be her son, or grandson, who sought Mama Murphy out to reunite with his grandmother and unlock the secrets of her powers so that he could take control of the wasteland of a clairvoyant overlord. For instance, no one would have to fear if their neighbors are synths if it could be revealed to them through visions. This next one involves the measures that wastelanders have been forced to take out of fear that anyone could be a synth. But could this be affected by previous isolationist origins? 2. Covenant origins. In May of 2229, an event that would become known as the Broken Mask Incident rocked Diamond City. A traveler, who claimed to be from out west, had been drinking at the central bar when he suddenly froze. Drawing the attention of others around him as his face began to twitch, he would unholster his firearm and execute the bartender, before turning his firearm on those around him. He would kill 10 of them before Diamond City security was able to put him down, discovering that he was no normal traveler, but a machine. This was when the citizens of Diamond City began to lock their doors as night, trusting no one as anyone could be a synth. A walled village, protected from raiders by a series of advanced sentry guns, would be constructed and go on to be known as Covenant, with its citizens priding themselves on how pristine their town looked. This would attract traders to the settlement that allowed it to grow into a powerhouse. But beneath this town hides a dark secret. Dr. Rosalind Chambers and her scientific team at Covenant were capturing wastelanders that could not pass their safe test and label them as a potential synth. This test mirrors the GOAT exam taken by the Vault 101 dwellers to determine what their future role would be in the vault. Dr. Chambers set up a prison in the nearby sewers, called the Compound, where they ran experiments on their captives in an attempt to uncover the Institute's secrets and locate where they came from. The Covenant's guards at the Compound are adorned in what seems to be painted over Vault Tech security armor, with the Vault Tech logo still visible on the helmet upon closer inspection. One of the scientists found in the Compound is also wearing a Vault Tech lab coat. Could Dr. Chambers and her team be from Vault 101? There is more that points towards this, with posters all over the Compound featuring exact copies of questions asked during the GOAT exam. One of these posters says, "Congratulations, you made one of the Vault 101 baseball teams." This seems to indicate that they may have come from Vault 101, but we are led to believe in Fallout 3 that no one who had ever left the vault survived. Or could answers be found deeper into the game? In the Vault Overseer's terminal, we can discover that sometime before 2241, the Vault 101 Overseer, prior to the one found in Fallout 3, had started to send scouts out into the wasteland to run tests on whether or not life on the surface was viable sometime before February 10th, 2241. Discovering how irradiated the Cephis had become, but discovering cities like Megaton thriving nonetheless, the Overseer himself led an expedition that would vanish entirely and never return. Seeing life on the Cephis unfit for long-term survival, the Vault fell back into its isolationist ways, and any mention mention of this became taboo. Could the citizens of Covenant be the descendants of that missing expedition team? It would explain their understanding of science and why they aim to style Covenant as the ideal pre-war community. In the Commonwealth, to survive, you have to be aware of the company you keep, but nobody questions the mysterious savior who will appear and take down hostiles with one single shot before vanishing, as silent as he arrived. 3. The Stranger's name. The mysterious stranger is a wasteland guardian that appears through the Fallout series, taking out a target of the protagonist with one critical shot. But who is this mysterious stranger? Nick Valentine has gathered all the information he could find into a case file. In his files, he notes that the mysterious stranger appears suddenly, killing without remorse, disappearing without a word, writing that the stranger has no known accomplices, no clear method for selecting his targets. Nick has never been able to come to a conclusion on the identity of the mysterious stranger, but what if his origins can be found at the very start of the series, with the stranger displaying the power to be just where he is needed to make one precise shot and a lifespan that allowed him to appear as early as 2102 in Fallout 76? This has left players to ask if this could be a power related to FEV. One Redditor, Albert Cole, has even speculated that he could be none other than one of the companions of Richard Gray, who led an attack on Mariposa military base in order to stem the tide of mutants that had been descending from there. According to the theory, the mysterious stranger could be none other than Mark, who would be wounded during the assault and forced to ascend back to the surface, but he would never be seen again. What we know is that every other member of this team is accounted for. Richard Gray became the psychic super mutant master, Harold became the heart of a sentient tree that would spread life throughout the wasteland, and Francine would perish from a gunshot wound dealt to her by the Vault security systems. Coincidentally, this would take place in 2102, the same year as the first sighting as the mysterious stranger. If this theory is to be believed, with Harold and Richard mutating into godlike entities and Mark disappearing completely, he could have evolved into an immortal guardian that is able to appear to those in need and save them from whatever threat they face. This one is a little far-fetched, but psychic powers have also been prevalent in every Fallout game, so there is precedent for this theory. This next theory aims to explain why Billy was able to survive 200 years trapped in a fridge without going feral, a perplexing mystery that led outrage among many of the fans. 4. Trapped ghouls. Not feral? How have certain ghouls managed to survive trapped for extended periods without food or water? Ghouls appear throughout the Fallout franchise, many of them having been born from the direct aftermath of the Great War. The severe radiation would cause many to mutate into zombie-like creatures known as ghouls. Their skin would degrade and flack off, causing their hair, nose, and ears to fall off and leaving their muscles exposed. Although many of these ghouls would retain their high thought processes, some would lose all their intellect, grow feral, and attack anything that did not look like a ghoul. Ghouls are still required to eat and drink, though their ability to consume food is greatly increased as they are immune to most diseases and radiation completely, with their bodies capable of regenerating any damage that might come with the consumption of more harmful foods. Though there seems to be some exceptions to ghouls needing to consume food and water. Coffin Willie was buried in a coffin for several months. Woody was entombed and exhibited as a mummy for weeks, while mysteriously unconscious the whole time. Billy Peabody was a child who survived the Great War inside a refrigerator, where he remained trapped 210 years until 2287. The TV series Cooper Howard was mentioned to have survived being repeatedly buried in a chained coffin years at a time. Though many would say that this could be due to their regenerative abilities, it still leaves the question as to why they had not gone feral, while so many other ghouls had. We know that all of these ghouls still retained the need to eat and drink, with Cooper Howard drinking constantly to remain hydrated and even going as far as to consume the flesh of other ghouls to stave off hunger. Many fans were outraged with the notion that Billy Peabody had survived for 210 years in a fridge without food and water, but what if I told you that it makes perfect sense? In the animal world, it's common to find species that enter a state of hibernation to survive the colder winter months, when food and water become scarce, and energy needs to be conserved. Hibernation is characterized by low body temperature, slow breathing and heart rate, and severely reduced metabolic rate. So, could the ghoul's unique biology adapt to situations where food and water cannot be obtained by going into a state of hibernation that renders them completely unconscious like Woody was? This unconscious state could be what prevented them from going feral, since the lack of socialization would have driven them feral otherwise. It would make sense and explain some of the inconsistencies in the lore, so I consider this one high up there on what could be fact. This next one could mean that the Brotherhood of Steel already had a presence at Nuka World long before its raider factions took over the place. 5. Nuka World Brotherhood Outpost. Nuka World makes the sole survivor fight through a gauntlet of powerful enemies that will eventually put them through a fierce battle with a rogue knight of the Brotherhood of Steel, which shouldn't even be around due to the the Brotherhood having only just arrived in the Commonwealth. Could there be more? What many people don't know is that this rogue may not have been the only knight of the Brotherhood of Steel to have chosen the Nuka World area to defect to. If you travel southeast of Bradburton in the outskirts of Nuka World, you will come across the Morton residence. The house has long since been abandoned and fallen into disrepair, with rad roaches infesting the area that the sole survivor have to clear. The sole survivor will have to enter through the basement, the remains. Mr. Morton himself can be found there, but if you continue upstairs in the garage, you can find a power armor station that is the only location in the game where a suit of power armor can spawn with pieces every style of Brotherhood painted power armor, including the otherwise unobtainable Brotherhood Initiate paint. Could this be all that's left of a splinter faction of the Brotherhood that defected away from Maxon? In Nuka Town backstage, you can find a note on a shelf at the northeast corner of the room. It states that Buzz, a member of the Pack Raider group from Nuka World, had found a Brotherhood outpost full of bodies and ghouls. When he went back to collect a piece of power armor nearby, he and his friend had been attacked by the Brotherhood and his friend lost their finger. A holotape found nearby then states that he went back and acquired the armor, but couldn't steer it properly as he fled from the Brotherhood and fell down a cliff, getting the power armor stuck. This cannot be found in-game, so we're left wondering if the Brotherhood received this power armor. Now, that seems to indicate that there should be a Brotherhood presence in Nuka World, but no outpost can be found anywhere. Nor does Maxon's Brotherhood mention anything about them back in the Commonwealth. So, we're led to believe that they packed their bags and left, leaving only the knight that defected to the raiders behind. It would make sense that the rogue knight would not be known by Maxon, as he would have dealt with the defector to prevent the raiders from acquiring information that could be used against them. This leads me to the conclusion that the Brotherhood of Steel members at Nuka World could have defected, and when they learned of Maxon's arrival in the Commonwealth, they moved further away to prevent being discovered. If they had only just left the area, could that mean that they did not expect the East Coast Brotherhood to have progressed as fast as they had? Could the East Coast Brotherhood have a biological advantage that few other factions have managed to attain? 6. Lack of civilizations. While playing through the Fallout series, you may wonder, why are larger communities few and far between? Communities like Diamond City and Good Neighbor are the outliers, with many failed civilizations dotted all over the Commonwealth. Raiders are far more prevalent, being found just about everywhere in the wasteland. These raiders are cruel, committing vile acts on their victims and with little to no remorse. Could it be that there is one simple answer for this? Everyone could be suffering from prolonged exposure to lead, which is known to increase the likelihood of future criminal activity, especially having individuals to develop a violent nature. Even simply having elevated levels of lead in bone marrow and blood tissue causes aggression, destructive, and delinquent behavior. Lead poisoning will also hinder attention spans and decreased cognitive performance, which would hinder the regrowth of society. As evident by the poor working conditions found in terminal entries throughout the game, environmental conservation and regulations weren't really a thing that people cherished pre-war. The Fallout timeline separates from our own around the end of World War II, in September of 1945, and laws preventing the use of lead pipes hadn't been passed until 1986 with the Safe Drinking Water Act. If Fallout did not have a mirror to such a law, which seems likely given the nuclear waste that's left in dump sites around the wasteland, it would mean that virtually all ground and piped water would be contaminated. This would explain the aggressive nature of the raiders, as well as why society has not been able to recover despite 200 years having passed since the bombs fell. Having access to clean water through Fallout 3's Project Purity could be why Maxon's Brotherhood was able to progress so much in such little time. With cleaner heads and capable attention spans, the Brotherhood could focus and direct their force to advance their society to where they could construct the Pridwin and arrive at the Commonwealth. The theory being true would also explain why the sole survivor and vault dwellers are so much more capable than the average wastelander, so they're unaffected by the lead effects of prolonged lead exposure. Not everyone is trying to avoid the toxins found out in the wasteland. There are some, like the Children of Adam, that seek those toxins out. This next theory questions if their toxic goals are being exploited, or do they have a legitimate silent savior that keeps them going. 7. Atomic Scam. During the Far Harbor DLC, the sole survivor is given the option of joining the Children of Adam, where they will encounter a mysterious figure that might not be as mysterious as we're led to believe. If you're unaware, the Children of Adam worship a god they call Adam, which they view as the personification of radiation and all things nuclear, such as atomic warheads. Where most people see weapons of mass destruction, the children see holy tools of creation. Generally, they believe the world was created when an atom was split, and that each nuclear detonation represents the birth of countless new universes. Atomites, as they call themselves, have developed a culture around the belief that there is a supernatural nature radiation. To join, the sole survivor will have to drink water from Adam's spring, which is heavily irradiated. After which, another worldly woman that seems more like a living shadow, cloaked in mist, will appear and guide them on a path through Far Harbor. This is the Mother of the Fog, and following her will eventually lead to one of the cult's holy sites. There, a series of cryptic notes can be found. Acolyte Richter will reveal to the sole survivor upon return to the cult's headquarters that most people believe her to be a holy spirit of Adam, but there are few who believe her to be a reclusive hermit. He recognizes that she has helped guide them many times in the past, even going as far as to say that they wouldn't be there without her. Around the shrine she guides the sole survivor to. Near Haddock Cove, there is a ruined house that has in its attic 3 notes that are formatted just like the ones found at the shrine the Mother of the Fog lead you to. The notes reveal some of what the children of Adam had been up to before the sole survivor arrived on the island of Far Harbor. Underneath this table are a few stealth boys, which could explain her ghostly appearance in the fog. Could she be scamming the children of Adam? With the notes tying this to the Mother of the Fog and the stealth boys, it appears as though she is a normal hermit, just as the minority believe. She may have taken on this role to help guide the children of Adam who were undergoing the effects of radiation-induced neuropsychiatric manifestations due to the severe radiation exposure, which causes delirium, cerebral microbleeding, and long-term cognitive deterioration. Or she could be exploiting the cultists by pocketing whatever ritualistic offerings they would leave her. While this theory doesn't explain why shadowy creatures appear as she guides the sole survivor to the shrine, it could be that she injects the sole survivor with a stealth boy, without their knowledge, for safe passage to the shrine. This would make sense. Shadowy creatures wouldn't be able to see the sole survivor, and their cognitive state would distort their sight and make them appear more magical than normal. Rather, you believe her to be a hermit or a deity. She seems to be protecting the children of Adam by guiding them to safety when they conduct their toxic rituals. So, at the end of the day, is there any harm in what she's doing? Far Harbor was such an interesting DLC and added a lot to the game, but this next theory might be a bit hard to swallow, especially for those that know the pain of having a loved one grow old and lose their memories. 8. Limited memory. Could Nick Valentine go on to forget his part in saving the Commonwealth and his adventures with the sole survivor entirely? If the sole survivor speaks to the leader of Arcadia, Dima, he will reveal that he was one of 2 prototype synths made by the Institute. The other is everyone's favorite wasteland detective, Nick Valentine, who Dima regards as a brother. Dima will also reveal that since he and Nick are prototypes, they have a limited memory storage capacity and will have to make room for new memories eventually. Dima defeated this shortcoming by upgrading his memory, but that option isn't available for Nick, possibly because it might limit his ability to effectively wear that stylist fedora of his, which would take away from his whole detective aesthetic. This seems to be supported by the start of the DLC, as it reveals that Kenji Nakano, the concerned father who acquires Nick's assistance to find his daughter, had assisted Nick out on an investigation. This was because Nick had needed access to a boat, and Kenji had one, and the skills to back it up. The client who had hired Nick to reacquire a lost heirloom had decided to pay in lead instead of caps, and turned on Nick and Kenji after they returned to him with it. Kenji was shot, so it was a pretty big event. It would make sense for Nick to remember that, but he doesn't. He can barely recall Kenji's name and struggles during their conversation. Nick also doesn't recall Dima whatsoever. So could it be that he will one day forget the events of Fallout 4 and his adventures with the sole survivor? Who knows? Let's just hope those memories of Kellogg's are the first to go. If too much of Nick is lost before Kellogg's memories, we might discover a more dramatic shift in Nick's personality in later installments of the series. 9. Reverse engineered. Fallout 4 has revealed so many aspects of the Fallout timeline that were previously left in the dark. This includes technologies that seem out of place and almost too advanced to have been a product of pre-war America. So were they? With characters like the Jack Cabot family, revealing strange details of ancient alien civilizations that remain intact below the surface of the Earth. During the intro cutscene of the game, the optional sole survivor Nate reveals that after the end of World War II, there was a sudden focus on nuclear power as energy rather than as a weapon. This was where our timeline split from Fallout's, with the Fallout universe gaining a seemingly endless supply of power that could benefit the livelihoods of everyone. Technology began to advance at an accelerated rate, which leads many fans to believe that alien technology could have been reverse engineered. The ship at the crash site in Fallout 4 looks eerily similar to the pre-war planes that can be found throughout the Commonwealth. Followers of this theory believe that the Roswell UFO incident of 1947 happened in this timeline, and this allowed for the first instance of humans reverse engineering alien technology, which would explain the sudden shift in timelines. In 1894, Lorenzo Cabot, father of Jack Cabot, went on an expedition to the Rub al-Khali Desert in the Middle East, searching for proof that there could be a precursor civilization hiding below the surface. With many believing his theory that this civilization could exist to be insane, he proved right when he discovered a vast subterranean city that held within it the artifacts and remains that could not be of human origin. Only one artifact would be removed from this site, a crown that granted him an extended lifespan and gave him superhuman abilities. Perhaps other sites belonging to this precursor civilization could have been discovered later and used to develop the strangely advanced technologies found throughout the series. With the evidence present in the series, this theory seems consistent with the lore in Fallout 4. But what if we had a closer connection to this precursor civilization than even Lorenzo Cabot could have imagined? This next theory dives into the deepest waters of Fallout lore, exposing why humans are affected in so many different ways by the forced evolutionary virus, and what these mutations could be leading to. 10. Jerskin Ordings extraterrestrial origins. Could radiation be pushing us towards a pre-engineered evolutionary line that exposure to FEV could be corrupting? Overall, the evidence presented in this theory seems to point at an alien influence in the evolution of humanity that is leading the wasteland towards an endpoint that the Zetans might be monitoring. Followers of this theory believe that ancient humans were experimented on by the Zetans or some other ancient culture, and their DNA could be found within our own, with whatever civilization initiating the climax of the Great War by activating humanity's nuclear systems in order to push humanity's evolution a little further, as we were not meant to reach their level of technology yet. This theory could explain why Lorenzo is affected by the crown, and why he can even wear it in the first place. Through the misfortune of the ghouls and super mutants, what we do know is that humans experience a variety of biological changes when exposed to radiation, and when exposed to FEV as well. Super mutants, as revealed in the terminal of Fallout 3's Vault 87, stating that both genders lose most of their visible indicators and take on an asexual state, and effectively starting with a clean slate as it works. With this comes a complete immunity to radiation, and their skin becomes green. As we know, Zetans have green skin themselves, and asexual, so could this indicate that FEV has caused Zetan DNA in humans to become more dominant and become a warped version of a Zetan? With the Zetans being so advanced, and super mutant dim-witted, this could be due to the imperfections of FEV. We are some that, with proper application of refined radiation, super mutants such as Virgil and Fox become far superior to their kindred. Virgil's intelligence is increased to such a degree that he is the only one in the Fallout series capable of reversing the effects of FEV. Some followers of this theory even believe that ancient humans were experimented on by the Zetans or some other ancient culture, and their DNA could be found within our own, with whatever civilization initiating the climax of the Great War by activating humanity's nuclear systems in order to push humanity's evolution a little further, as we were not meant to reach their level of technology yet. What we do know is that humans experience a variety of biological changes when exposed to radiation, with those unfortunate ghouls and super mutants when exposed to FEV as well. Super mutants, as revealed in the terminal of Fallout 3's Vault 87, states that both genders lose most of their visible indicators and take on an asexual state, and effectively starting with a clean slate as it works. With this comes a complete immunity to radiation, and their skin becomes green. As we know, Zetans have green skin themselves and are asexual. So could this indicate that FEV has caused Zetan DNA in humans to become more dominant and become a warped version of a Zetan? With the Zetans being so advanced and super mutant dim-witted, this could be due to the imperfections of FEV. We are some that, with proper application of refined radiation, super mutants such as Virgil and Fox become far superior to their kindred. Virgil's intelligence is increased to such a degree that he is the only one in the Fallout series capable of reversing the effects of FEV. Ghouls could be a result of this alien DNA being more predominant in certain individuals, with their outward appearances rapidly mutating to be more like the Zetans, but without the coloration, which is why they become immune to radiation. The abominations found aboard Mothership Zeta in Fallout 3 could be the result of Zetans experimenting with the activation of this DNA that created another form of imperfect hybrids that displays more of the Zetan side of their DNA, but retaining their human skin colors and facial features. Supporting this theory is that they seem to act a lot like feral ghouls, and pre-war books, cigarettes, money, and even harmonicas can be looted from their bodies. Alien genetic engineering could be why the children of Adam are attracted to radiation in the first place, as they revere ghoulification as a form of enlightenment. This is supported by a faction of the children of Adam located at the Kingsport Lighthouse that revere a glowing one kept in the lighthouse as the blessed in the tower. It could be noted that the cultists at Nucleus view ghouls to be unfit for Adam's grace, as their view might be affected by the ghouls being an imperfect manifestation of this DNA. Lorenzo Cabot's crown could also factor into this, as it could have been an ancient medical device that stabilized the original genetic experiments that would lead to modern humans in the Fallout timeline. With all this information, this theory is still a tough one to swallow, but if it's true, could it mean that the Zetans are incapable of reproducing themselves, and species such as our own were created throughout the galaxy as a means for them to multiply? We'll have to wait until future installments reveal more. These were for Fallout 4's biggest theories. Explained! While entering the wastelands of the Fallout universe for the first time, many of you may have had questions that appear simple at first glance, even dumb, though as you play through the Fallout series, they were almost certainly eclipsed by the greater mysteries within the universe. Today, we're presenting you with Fallout's dumbest questions explained, so that these questions can possibly be answered and put to rest the idea that those questions were dumb in the first place, as many of them have only vague answers that require a bit of extra diving to conclude. What are stimpaks? Stimpaks are amongst the most useful items in the game, as players would most certainly have a hard time surviving the perils of the wasteland without them. They're pretty much essential to the story, as without the health regeneration that they provide, most large waves of enemies would not be possible to defeat without the occasional run, hide, health, and go back at it. Could you imagine how difficult the raid bosses, or even the nuke bosses of Fallout 76 would be if stimpaks were not easily acquired? You practically have to spam the stimpak hotkey during the raid to survive for even a few seconds, especially during the final boss Ultrasight Terror, as its sheer damage output is enough to wipe most teams in seconds. But what are stimpaks, and where did they come from? That might seem like a dumb question, but there isn't actually much we know about their origins. What we do know is that stimpaks are a handheld syringe-delivered medication that provides its benefits through direct injection into the bloodstream. Stimpak is short for Stimulation Delivery Package, and their payload rapidly boosts the body's own regenerative properties. The exact concoction within them is unknown, but what we do know is that they're loaded with a variety of healing medications and stimulants, appearing similar to a real-world EpiPen. They were originally intended to be used in conjunction with an autodoc, which is a miracle of pre-war medical technology in its own right, as it's capable of performing even the most complex medical procedures without requiring a full staff of qualified medical personnel laboring for constant hours to ensure that every incision is preformed with the utmost care. At some point, the stimpaks were released commercially on their own. Curiously enough, stimpaks can be used to heal injured animals as well, as in the Fallout Amazon series we are shown dog meat being healed by the ghoulified Cooper Howard. They can even be used on mutants, such as super mutants and ghouls, though their genetics are far beyond that of a normal human. The more common stimpaks are mostly apt at healing minor injuries, and not capable of healing the more severe wounds, leading to the advanced variant known as the Super Stimpak to be created. There are also additional variants, such as the Stimpak Diffuser, which distributes aerosolized stimpak healing in a localized area, diluted and even expired stimpaks, indicating that the fluid inside can expire or become diluted, as well as automatically injecting regular and super stimpaks for when you need healing, but can't waste time pressing buttons on your Pip-Boy to do it yourself. The Super Stimpak contains an additional vial of more potent healing chems, providing an exponentially increased healing effect. However, it should be noted that Super Stimpaks are known to cause minor tissue trauma to the healed areas, due to the potency of its medications. So, lore-wise, it's not really a good idea to rely on these more advanced stimpaks. Though an inventor and distributor is never mentioned for either the autodoc or stimpaks, we can find a very similar technology called health dispensers that were used by the United States military during the events of the liberation of Anchorage. These were manufactured by Lee Rapid Pharmaceuticals and use a very similar delivery method which utilizes a hose, gauge, and needle. This could imply that the stimpaks we see throughout the Fallout series were also produced by the Lee Rapid Pharmaceuticals company for the civilian market. Unlike stimpaks, health dispensers are bulky and contain more than one usage. Whether this is true or not, it should be noted that players can actually find a recipe to craft stimpaks of their own using medicinal herbs during the events of the Honest Hearts DLC for Fallout New Vegas. This requires Brock flower and Xander root, rather, or not. Those are ingredients used in the production of actual stimpaks is anyone's guess. Where do ghouls originate? Starting out the Fallout series, we are led to believe that ghouls are merely a byproduct of living creatures mutated by prolonged and rapid exposure to radiation. As most creatures would have been killed by it, ghouls were molded by it into a form that bears a shocking resemblance to the mythical ghouls of old folklore. This process is known as ghoulification, and in humans seems to result in near immortality, with a side effect that they eventually go feral and forget all of who they were. The trade-off for that risk is enhanced regeneration of wounds, even the ability to completely regrow severed limbs or reattached fallen ones, with those limbs maintaining full function. Ghouls also boast a natural immunity to radiation exposure, with radiation exposure providing an even greater boost to their regenerative abilities. The ghoulification process renders those unfortunate enough to undergo it completely infertile, with most of their hair falling out and their skin resembling burn victims. The majority of the ghouls that players will come across are feral and will attack on sight, healing most Wastelanders to refer to as zombies, a slur to ghouls that comes from pre-war movies. Most Wastelanders consider them a separate species entirely, leading them to become outcasts of society, and more than often be shot on sight, as it's hard for many to distinguish them from the more common ferals that descended from the pre-war cities. After large populations were struck by nuclear radiation when the bombs were dropped, those feral ghouls rely solely on animalistic instinct and aggressively pursue any baseline human and potential prey they come across. This has led many non-feral ghouls to form their own societies, which often utilizes feral ghouls as protection. Though many ghouls continue to refer to themselves as ghouls, there are some individuals who prefer other terms for their kind, such as Doc Barrows, a ghoul doctor and scientist from the ghoul community of Underworld in the capital Wasteland, who prefers the term necrotic post-humans, or alternatively, post-necrotic humans. Of the many species that have been known to experience ghoulification, there are few that you may not have even realized were ghouls, with the most notable being mongrels, which are feral ghoul canines, and yaoguai, which are ghoul bears. Though it's unknown whether these ghouls are still feral, as some yaoguai are known to have offspring and mongrels can be found in packs, with even alphas leading them. Ghoul gorillas, playfully named ghoul-rillas, can also be found in the ruins of Nuka World during the Fallout 4 DLC of the same name in the Safari Adventure Zone, with their own human among them. Though many might believe that ghouls are solely a byproduct of the bombs dropping at the culmination of the Great War and the heavy radiation unleashed upon the wasteland after that, what many will eventually uncover is that there are plenty of ghouls that had already been ghoulified prior of that fateful day that would make the Fallout universe into what we know it as today. Curie will mention during encounters with ghouls that a doctor by the name of Platt predicted the future existence of ghouls, though it seems that ghouls may have already existed in the shadows prior to that. Isolated medical experimentation would be conducted prior to the Great War that would transform individuals into what would eventually go on to be known as ghouls, though many wealthy individuals would eventually seek out ghoulification as a means of attaining immortality. Experiments were conducted in hopes of creating a cure for radiation that sought to provide radiation immunity in anticipation of the nuclear holocaust that would come to pass. An unnamed company located in Boston, Massachusetts would experiment with such a drug, with a research assistant known by her last name, Peters, would volunteer to test such a cure on herself. Holotapes recorded by her can be found in an abandoned house located in the ruins of Charlestown during the events of Fallout 4. Her holotapes make it clear that in February 2077 she would expose herself to 6 sieverts of radiation before testing treatment serum, though, as it turns out, she was actually part of the trial's control group, so the treatment she administered was a placebo with no effects on the radiation that afflicted her, leaving one last farewell message to her parents in the event that her treatment failed. Though she had been given a placebo, she would succumb to the effects of the radiation, and instead of dying, she would instead become a feral ghoul, though in the mid-2020s, a man by the name of John McDonough would acquire the only remaining sample of this drug and sought it as a way to gain a new sense of self, seeking to cure his emotional instability and self-hatred. John would go on to change his last name to Hancock and found the town of Goodneighbor, acting as its mayor and a potential follower during the events of Fallout 4. During the recently released Fallout 76 expansions, The Ghoul Within, players were given the option to undergo a similar experiment and become a ghoul themselves. Meeting Parthenia Blankenship, a ghoul scientist and member of the all-ghoul faction known as the Revenants, who reside at Radiant Hills, she will offer the player the option to make their character a ghoul, using a serum she created. Her father was a general in the United States military, and was stationed at a nuclear missile silo in Appalachia, and her mother was in the picture, so she was given permission to live at the missile silo with her father. After a nuclear warhead malfunctioned during the start of the Great War and failed to lift off, she was abandoned by her father and left alone at the silo. Parthenia was an avid reader and would study the only paper material she had at her exposure, which involved laboratory equipment and military secrets. She would uncover experiment chemicals that had been transported from another location and seemed to exhibit advanced healing properties, leading her to conduct experiments on herself using the chemicals, which lead to her discovering the process of ghoulification. According to Parthenia, very little documentation had been provided with the chemical at the silo, and she was unable to determine where it had originated, though her research would allow her to become familiar enough that she can describe its molecular structure. Parthenia would discover that ultracite ore, when used alongside the chemical, would speed up the process of ghoulification, and by 2105, this was able to create an injection-free delivery method using an inhaler. Desmond Lockhart, a British international intelligence agent prior in the year 2077, would be amongst the global leaders and members of the intelligence community that sought to extend their lifespan and genetic ability in hopes that they could survive the bombs dropping and rebuild failed society. He would expose himself to controlled levels of lethal radiation, and perhaps even use the same serum that Hancock had obtained and Peter sought to test, to make himself into a ghoul. He even reveals that he was not the only one to seek out ghoulification prior to the war, which could indicate that there are many more pre-war ghouls out there waiting for future installments to uncover. A criminal mobster by the name of Eddie Winter would experiment with radiation on himself after a physician in East Boston presented him with the theory that the right kind of radiation exposure at the right amounts could mutate human cells. He would coerce the owners of the Wicked Ship Company to smuggle him some nuclear materials, and with the help of his physician, he would undergo the experiment and transform into a ghoul in October 2077, living the next 210 years sealed inside a secret bunker in Boston that he had commissioned after he was alerted to the threat of nuclear war breaking out, only being discovered during the events of Fallout 4. Strangely enough, the company that had been creating the serum that would enable the willing to become a ghoul may have been Robco, or even the United States Army. As in the Commonwealth, there is a hidden robotics research facility underneath the Robco Sales and Service Center that had conducted transhuman medical experiments on prisoners given to them by the U.S. military for the development of robobrains to use in the Great War. The facility was top secret, and workers would frequently disappear, with management establishing protocols for the quick destruction of evidence should it be needed. In a brig behind dozens of mechanically sealed doors, feral ghouls can be found deadlocked jail cells that had open-view glass ceilings, with an observation room above, so their transformations could be studied. Several of these ghouls can be found strapped to gurneys held on tracks in the floor that would carry them into laboratories for dissection, and they would be incinerated upon completion. There is a row of decontamination arches at a mandatory checkpoint along this track. Outside of the cells, human remains can be found, distinct from the ghoul remains, which generally remain restrained or imprisoned. In the research area, tanks containing the remains of feral ghouls can also be found. If this isn't enough to point the finger at Robco, because in Cranberry Bog of West Virginia, another Robco research center can be found that contained a feral ghoul sealed within an observation chamber underground. Why are radroaches big? Have you ever heard the old wise tale that cockroaches can survive a nuclear bomb? Well, shockingly enough, this is somewhat true, though not entirely. Amongst the first types of enemies encountered in every Fallout game after Fallout 2 are the radroaches, which are the ancestors of American cockroaches that have mutated over centuries to be far more massive and hunt in packs. Contrary to popular belief, while the name radroach was introduced in Fallout 3, giant cockroaches had appeared in Fallout Tactics and were to reappear in Van Buren as well. Prior to the Great War, American cockroaches were already the largest species of cockroach commonly found in homes and commercial buildings. Known for their speed and ability to thrive in warm, damp environments, they are even capable of flying short distances and are often found in basements, sewers, and around pipes and drains. They're practically anywhere that they can find food. Because they're omnivorous and will eat almost anything, including normally toxic waste products such as grease, they can even chew through leather. With their dietary habits so diverse, perhaps what benefited American cockroaches the most is that they're capable of surviving for months without food, though they can only survive about a week without water. According to BBC Science Focus, a cockroach can only survive between 6 and 15 times the lethal radiation dose for humans, meaning that water sources that would have been rendered toxic to humans after the Great War could be ingested by cockroaches without a problem. So, while it is true that they're mostly immune to radiation, they can still be affected by it. We see that in glowing radroaches that might act as the ghoulified variants of their species, though they are shown to interact with the rest of their kind just fine. They're become so large after the war that they're about the size of a house cat, with a massive thorax that could fend off attacks from much larger predators. With their massive reinforced incisors, in numbers they are capable of taking down and devouring much larger prey, including humans. So imagine smashing a cockroach just for a pack of much larger cockroaches to swarm out from the dark recesses of your house and attempt to devour you whole. Radroaches are no laughing matter, as they've been shown time and time again as being capable of taking down entire vaults. Such a threat that they are possibly the only reason why the Lone Wanderer was capable of escaping Vault 101 before its security could properly react, as they were dealing with a seemingly organized radroach attack. Radroaches, just like their pre-war counterparts, can be found in most places underground and anywhere that they might be able to eat across the entirety of North America. Some wastelanders, such as Ma June in the Fallout television series, use their ability to digest nearly anything to farm them as a reliable source of meat, though it's easy for them to grow grow into a problem if they're left to grow out of control, as a group of survivors from Vault 31 would learn after Ma Jun's rad roach farm was unleashed upon them. To more seasoned survivors, they're less likely to pose a challenge, as adept wastelanders can dispatch a pack of them if they're aware of the rad roach's approach. Rad roaches are territorial and rather aggressive, but seem to be capable of distinguishing what targets are vulnerable, as they will only attack when they feel threatened if they encounter a larger creature. Basically, all the traits that allowed their real-world counterparts, the American cockroach, to survive is further enhanced by their mutated size. But why are they so big? It turns out to be quite simple. Insects are poikilothermic, which means that they cannot maintain a constant body temperature and rely on external temperatures to regulate their heat. As temperatures suddenly rose due to the intense nuclear fallout that engulfed most of the planet, insect species experienced thermal stress, which real-world research has indicated would affect their behavior and their size. As temperatures increase, some insects will become larger due to increased heat, though the impact of heat will also increase their metabolic rate and lead to more aggressive behavior. Since after the war, there were corpses everywhere, and no one left to smash them, cockroaches were able to feast on anything they could get their mandibles on, which allowed their size to grow until they reached a point of environmental stability where available food sources could sustain their size. It's possible that the FEV leaking out of research institutions and unfortunate vaults could have also impacted their growth, though due to them remaining largely intact in form, it's unlikely. Why are bottle caps currency? It might feel off to fans introduced to the Fallout series through the television series that bottle caps have become the de facto currency and the standard that generally every trader is more than willing to accept. As in the real world, we wouldn't think twice about leaving a discarded bottle cap in a trash receptacle to be sent to the garbage dump. They're generally considered not worth the effort in collecting, as they have no value, but in the Fallout series they're universally sought after in the American wasteland, from California all the way to Boston. So why are bottle caps the standard currency? Prior to the outbreak of the Great War, Dr. Mobius, one of the Big MT think tank executives and a prominent scientist, predicted that due to their durability, portability, and that they can be instantly recognized, bottle caps would become one of the most common currencies accepted in a post-war North America, ultimately proving true. The first known civilization to use bottle caps as a currency and validate Dr. Mobius's claim would be the Hub, establishing its acceptance in the year 2093, with the Hub being a major trading station in New California due to its oasis that provided wastelanders with a source of clean water that traders originating from the Hub would use to establish it as a powerhouse. They would select bottle caps for one very important reason. They were limited. This is because the technology to manufacture new bottle caps had been lost, and if new bottle caps could be minted, the method used to paint their surfaces with the various pre-war logos had also been lost, which is why you can't forge fake Sunset Sarsaparilla Star bottle caps and have them accepted by Old Fetus for his treasure, as he was the pre-war robotic mascot for the Sunset Sarsaparilla Soda Company and would know a fake when he saw one due to the paint not quite matching what they would have done pre-war. With the lack of machinery to produce new bottle caps, this made counterfeiting efforts almost impossible. Even the metals used in their production would have to be made using a specific composition of metals in order for a bottle cap to be accepted as genuine. With only a limited number of bottle caps out there, it preserves their value against inflation, though caravan companies, such as the Crimson Caravan Company, would aggressively target counterfeiters and destroy machinery that could be used to produce more so that nobody could inflate the currency. Though not all bottle cap presses would be destroyed, caravan companies were allowed to keep a few to replace worn-out and damaged bottle caps, so that they could keep the currency stable. As all currencies need to be backed by some sort of standard, such as the gold and silver standards that were abolished by the United States in 1933 and replaced with the economic trust standard, the merchants of the Hub would support bottle caps as a common unit of exchange by backing it with pure fresh water. There's a chance that the common use of bottle caps on the East Coast could have spawned in Appalachia around 2096, which would have only been 3 years after it had been established in the Hub. In order to promote the release of Nuka-Cola Quantum, the Nuka-Cola Corporation would partner with the White Spring Resort of West Virginia. As part of the partnership deal, all of the robotic vendors found at the White Spring Mall were programmed to accept bottle caps instead of dollars, which allowed wastelanders who found the nearly intact resort to exchange bottle caps they scavenged for virtually anything they would need to survive in the post-apocalyptic world. After which, the prominent caravan company operating around the region, the Blue Ridge Caravan, would spread the use of the currency, as they are known to have trade routes that extend all the way from Kentucky to Georgia. The thing is, we can't really be sure, as a lot of what was established in Fallout 76 is already fated to be destroyed in the time of Fallout 3, but there is a chance that bottle caps could have simply become the norm in the eastern half of America prior to whatever calamity would undergo the survivors of the Appalachian wasteland. Perhaps the most definitive answer for why bottle caps are the standard currency in the Fallout franchise comes from none other than Scott Campbell, a developer who worked on the first 2 Fallout games under the Interplay banner. He recounted the day that he and his fellow Fallout designer, Brian Fryermuth, began to spitball ideas for what the currency would be. They couldn't use a pure bartering system, as it would have been too difficult for players to understand the value of items. They were considering bullets, as they are definitely useful in the wasteland, but they scrapped that idea when they realized that people would be very hesitant to use things like machine guns, since every trigger pull would directly lower their bank accounts, and that level of financial restraint wouldn't be enjoyable. So Scott Campbell thought to himself, what shiny token-sized thing would you find strewn around the trash piles? Something common, but not so common as to be everywhere? And eureka, he came up with the idea of bottle caps. Scott especially liked that the sound of a string of bottle caps would be very similar to that of a coin purse. Bottle caps seem to have been an interesting conclusion to a dilemma that they needed to solve in a logical manner, cementing it as a staple of the Fallout franchise, and establishing a strong lore supporting its widespread use that would only continue to grow more prominent for years to come as trade routes between settlements grew themselves. Why is civilization stunted? Eventually every fan of the Fallout series has that moment where they question why there has been such little growth in the nearly 220 years that the games and television show expand through. Why are there no larger civilizations? Communities like Diamond City, Good Neighbor, Rivet City, Megaton, and the NCR are the outliers, with the vast majority of wastelanders devolving into psychopathic raiders that will sooner try to eat you than prolong their lives through simple and honest trade. Raiders are everywhere. You don't have to go far from one raider outpost before finding another, with every raider faction being fiercely against one another, and many of them prefer to just butcher their victims rather than enslave them for labor. These raiders are cruel, committing vile acts on their victims and with little to no remorse, with no desire to ease their lives in the slightest by simply growing a farm. Could it be that there is one simple answer for why society has been unable to flourish in the post-apocalyptic hellscape that is Fallout? Sure, one could say that the abundance of chems available to the average wastelander could be why they're so aggressive. With junkies mainly being driven by the goal of achieving their next high, it's more than likely something far more different. There seems to be a far more sinister poison lurking just beneath the surface of the Fallout franchise that will effectively doom civilization for centuries onward, with the only civilizations to thrive being those who can reach untainted waters deeper within the Earth's crust. This shadowy truth could be that everyone is indeed suffering from prolonged exposure to lead. Such exposure is known to cause an increase in the likelihood of future criminal activity, often causing individuals to develop an especially violent nature akin to the raiders we see throughout the Fallout franchise. Studies have even shown that individuals with elevated levels of lead in their bone marrow and blood tissue will be more aggressive, destructive, and express antisocial behavior. This would affect individuals in a way that would lead to an increased likelihood to use chems, as lead poisoning will also hinder attention spans and decreased cognitive performance, making them more likely to abuse chems that would otherwise only be used to treat illnesses. It's very evident by the poor working conditions found in terminal entries throughout the game, with a general disregard for human life shown in the form of experiments performed on unsuspecting United States citizens. Environmental conservation and regulations weren't really a thing that people cherished pre-war. The Fallout timeline separates from our own around the end of World War II, in September of 1945, and laws preventing the use of lead pipes hadn't been passed until 1986 with the Safe Drinking Water Act. So it's very unlikely that the United States of the Fallout timeline ever committed to preventing the use of lead pipes, as they can still be found throughout the game series, and especially in Fallout 4 and 76, where they are used as weapons. With lead contaminating virtually everything, it's no wonder why aggression is the typical response that both humans and creatures of the wasteland undergo when they spot something that does not look like them. It's no secret that low intelligence bears prejudice and hate. More often, ghouls are subject to that hate more than any other group. We've seen what happens when groups are able to undergo the process of cleaning their drinking water and the ground soil where they harvest their crops. The Brotherhood of the East Coast was able to build an empire that allowed them to establish contact and even construct airships to travel across the continent and meet up with other Brotherhood chapters. This was only due to Lone Wanderer of Fallout 3 completing Project Purity and cleansing the Potomac River, one thing that greatly benefited society in that region. The NCR was able to achieve vast societal growth through the hub's oasis and developments in deep penetrating contaminating water purification systems, allowing their nation to read from LA to New Vegas, before collapsing and devolving due to external sabotage in the heart of their society that reintroduced the very contaminates that poisoned the minds of wastelanders before such achievements had been perfected. Areas like the ruins of Pittsburgh, now known simply as the Pit, are contaminated with so many toxins that only raiders who rule by brutal punishment and cruelty are able to survive, showcasing just how bad the toxins of the old world are continuing to doom the wasteland all these years later. This is the reason why the sole survivor, lone wanderer, and vault dweller are capable of achievements far beyond the average wastelander, as they're unaffected by the lead effects of prolonged lead exposure due to their upbringing having been spared the more rapid poisons unleashed upon society with the dropping of the bombs. Hopefully this video has helped you realize that in the Fallout universe, there are no truly dumb questions, and the answers for what seem to be simple questions can take us so deep that we are exploring long-lost secret laboratories and simulations meant to prepare soldiers for war overseas. This has been Fallout's Dumbest Questions Explained. If you would like to see Fallout's most powerful weapons explained, click the video on the screen.